10. Just a reminder that nowadays you can watch the whole show live on the LBC app on Global Player or the LBC YouTube channel, and an increasing number of you are doing just that. Now, NHS staff could be barred from wearing political badges on their uniforms, such as pro-Palestinian symbols, as part of proposals to help tackle anti-Semitism. The measure is one of several recommendations in a review by the government's independent advisor on anti-Semitism, Lord Mann. Now, the review examined anti-Semitism and other forms of racism within the NHS, and its findings include that some Jewish patients and NHS staff have felt the need to hide their religious identity. Health Secretary James Murray said Lord Mann's report has made a series of robust and practical recommendations to tackle anti-Semitism, which the government has accepted. So the Department of Health and Social Care, they've said the government is supporting the recommendations in full, subject to consultation and further engagement with key stakeholders. It will work with the organisations named in Lord Mann's report towards delivering the recommendations for the wider system. Now, Jim Mackay, or is it Jim Mackey, Chief Executive of NHS England, said, "We accept all of the recommendation in Lord Mann's review, and as a leadership community, we will act swiftly to implement them. The NHS is at its best as a place of compassion, care and unity, not conflict. And there is unacceptable anti-Semitism and racism in the NHS faced by both our staff and our patients, and we must root this out." Other recommendations made by Lord Mann include stronger accountability for NHS managers, improved recording and monitoring of racist incidents, and enabling more patients to record their ethnicity as Jewish. Now, I think this raises a number of issues, doesn't it? Because is he suggesting that politically themed badges, so something that would say Free Palestine, Free Gaza or something, would be unacceptable, and yet religious symbols like the Star of David or a cross would be acceptable? I mean, where do you draw the line here? Because I think everyone is going to have a different place of drawing the line. And I think there will be some Jewish people who feel very uncomfortable if they're suddenly confronted by a doctor or a nurse with an overtly pro-Palestinian message on a badge. I kind of understand that. You could argue that they're being oversensitive, but I mean, and just because you are wearing a pro-Palestinian symbol, Free Gaza symbol, does not intrinsically on its own make you anti-Semitic, does it? Or does it? 0345 6060 973. I've got a much more simple solution. Just ban all political symbols from workplace uniforms or dress. Just do that, and then nobody has a problem. Well, this afternoon, my colleague Sheila Fogarty spoke to the man who carried out this report for the government, the Labour peer Lord John Mann, and he explained why NHS staff wearing political badges, such as the pro-Palestine ones, just isn't appropriate.
No political symbolism, no political messaging, simply no political badges. And the example
not
I
just
gave,
pro-Palestinian or pro-Israel, but not at all.
The example I gave to the NHS leaders that I met at right at the beginning, I said, if I'm in a dentist's chair and the dentist's about to drill my teeth, I don't expect that dentist to have a "I support the Palestinians" or an "I love Israel" badge on. I expect them not to have their politics
in
my face, literally in my face, as they're drilling my teeth. It's not appropriate to do it. That's not the NHS that we grew up with.
And not just those two examples, but other examples.
Listen, I'm a member of the Labour Party. My dentist had a Labour Party badge and I'd be quite happy with that. But you might not be. Therefore, there should not be a Labour Party badge worn. Political symbols, political messaging have no place in the workplace of the NHS. Have your views outside in your own free time. And also, don't use the NHS branding. For example, your identification on social media. Don't have the NHS logo if you're going to spout about politics.
But you see that a lot.
And that's totally unacceptable. Whether it's politics I like or politics I abhor, don't use the NHS to promote your views.
Well, we've got to unpack a lot in what John Mann said there, because I think some of it is quite sensible. And in other ways, I think it goes far too far. I don't think that if you work for the NHS, you should be denied the opportunity of expressing a political opinion in your private life. If you have your own social media, I see absolutely no problem in you expressing a political view, whether it's pro a political party or whether it's to express support for Israel or express support for Palestine. I have no problem with that. I do have a problem, though, with people wearing it on their NHS uniforms. Is that a sensible position? Is that a middle ground that we can all coalesce around? Or not? Well, Danny Stone joins me now, Chief Executive of the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust, which has worked with medical professionals, membership groups to deliver training on anti-Semitism to NHS staff, and assisted Lord John Mann with the report, which was published today. Danny, very good evening to you. I'm assuming that you buy into the conclusions that Lord Mann came to.
Yes, so our organisation provides the Secretariat to Lord Mann as the government's independent advisor, and I am supportive of the recommendations, having contributed to them. Iain, firstly, thank you for giving this some air on your show. I think it's an important issue, and it is important to state anti-Semitism is at record levels. This is a national crisis, and the NHS is not exempt from that. So this report is timely and it's important. And what Lord Mann has sought to do with this is to try and improve the systems so that anti-Semitism can be better addressed through better reporting, better training. But that will impact all forms of racism, not only anti-Semitism. But on uniforms specifically, and I listened quite carefully to what you said there, the NHS, when you're in hospital, let's say, you're in your most vulnerable. That is the place that you want to be treated without being concerned about what the doctor or dentist or other person is thinking, what their political views are. And as you kind of pointed to in the introduction, people are refusing to identify themselves as Jewish for fear at the moment. That's not good enough. And that's what John's trying to address, is this fear, the fact that Jewish people are having this different experience and a concern about presenting, whether it be to have a baby or to be treated in the NHS. He's not suggesting that people cannot have political opinions. It's about the way in which they badge themselves one way or another in their private lives versus their professional life.
But if you badge yourself on your work uniform as being pro-Palestinian or pro-Gaza or whatever, that does not intrinsically make you anti-Semitic, does it?
No, and John doesn't say that in the report. I think the point is that Jewish people have reported that whether it be NHS staff in the workplace or whether it be anywhere else, some of them are feeling uncomfortable, and that has led to a feeling of whether it be isolation or fear. Now, you might argue that they shouldn't because the Palestinian flag doesn't mean that, but he has said the same in respect of wearing an Israeli flag for others. The point is, and I think most of Britain would accept, we shouldn't care what an individual doctor, what their particular position is or anything else. We care most about the fact that we want to be treated without having to think about that when we're in a vulnerable position.
Yeah, but how far do you take this? Because if you're trying to ameliorate the hurt feelings or the potentially hurt feelings of a patient, and what if a patient says, but I only want to be treated by a white doctor. I don't want to be treated by an Asian or a black doctor. I mean, you wouldn't bow to that.
No, this isn't about the kind of the hurt feelings. This is, as I said, this is about, there are Jewish women who are not presenting at hospital to have their babies for fear that they are going to be mistreated or treated differently. Right? That needs to be addressed. Now, the NHS the way that the uniform guidance is working, as I understand it, it's about what one can wear. So there will be, I don't think there's any expectation that people will not be able to wear religious symbols. I think people, as I understand it, there is an agreed approach from the NHS in relation to Pudsey Bear, right, and particular campaigns. I think the point is that political campaigns, political slogans.
But what counts as a political? I mean, obviously, a Free Palestine badge would count as a political campaign. But Steve has just texted to say, what about the Pride badge? I wear mine with pride in part to ensure people feel comfortable. But it's technically a political symbol.
Well, as I understand it, there's an agreed Pride badge or marker for the NHS already. So I think that's already accounted.
All right, well, another one. What about the Ukrainian flag? I mean, what's the difference?
I think from what I understand, Lord Mann's perspective, no flags should be there. Because, again, this is about being treated well and without any concerns by a doctor or a nurse or others in an NHS.
I mean, isn't this?
Sorry, Ian. The point is actually that we've not actually covered the report itself, which, for example, talks about the way in which Jewish patients are captured through the data, because Jews are both a religious and an ethnic group, and at present there isn't a way of recording that, and that has an impact on health outcomes. That is something that the NHS needs to do. John is trying to reset the way in which the NHS works in respect of employment. So anti-Semitism should be seen as an employment issue, whereby a trust takes action against doctors expressing anti-Semitism. And let's be clear, we can talk about badges all day, but John gave the example this morning of a Jewish staff member who had had bacon smeared on their locker, right, and was afraid to report it. That's what we're talking about here. So we can go back and forth on the kind of, the kind of symbolic nature of badges or what have you, but we're talking in a context in which Jewish people are being murdered on our streets, in which we've got the highest levels of anti-Semitism ever recorded. And what his report is seeking to do is to address the systems so that anti-Semitism is an employment issue, not just an issue for regulators, that the training is there, that the systems for reporting are there. That's what the report is at. And part of that is ensuring that people are comfortable at the point of treatment and that the rules are sufficient and the guidance is sufficient. That's the focus of the report. That's the important point.
Danny, thank you very much. That's Danny Stone, Chief Executive of the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust. We'll come to your calls in a moment. It's 16 minutes past 7.
LBC.
One particular problem, which, I'm not denying it is a problem, not just in the NHS, but in many workplaces up and down the country, that there is a problem of Islamophobia as well. Well, you can't just sort of ignore that. There's a problem with all sorts of different issues, and people naturally sometimes want to express those views by the way of wearing badges. So what would your solution be to this? Dr. Josh Parker is a GP who's also a clinical lecturer in medical ethics at Lancaster University. Josh, very good evening to you. What are the ethics behind this, do you think?
Good evening. Thanks for inviting me on. You're absolutely right. It raises a ton of different ethical issues around trust in public institutions, around equality, inclusion, around freedom of expression of staff and patients, to name a few.
So what's your reaction to the recommendations? Because clearly the government intends to implement them.
It's a very difficult one. What it seems to me the report is trying to do is tread a careful line between trying to address racism and discrimination, which unfortunately is a problem in the NHS, maintaining a particular focus on anti-Semitism. So wanting to focus on anti-Semitism while not sort of single it out. And so, as you've alluded to already, the big problem is going to be one of consistency and finding a principled way to focus on anti-Semitism without raising all these different questions about, well, why not this aspect or this aspect or another political issue.
In a sense, what's going to happen here is that they're going to have to spend money on policing this, aren't they? Because, is wearing, for example, a flag the Palestinian flag. Is that a political statement? I suppose it is in some ways. But then again, you could also say, well, should Jewish doctors and nurses be allowed to wear the Star of David? Now, that's a religious symbol. I mean, it's part of the Israeli flag as well, but it is predominantly a religious symbol. Are we now going to say, well, no religious symbols should be allowed to be worn in the NHS?
Yeah, so there is this big question about how you distinguish political statements from other forms of statements. I think another issue is around, badges, things that people wear being quite a sort of blunt statement, that there isn't much room for nuance around the detail of those political sort of statements, or kind of room for conversation. And that, I guess that's part of the challenge, is that when people see a badge like that, then they will interpret that in a certain context and derive a meaning from that, which may or may not be fully accurate of what the person is trying to express. So there could be a mismatch here between what someone's trying to express and what the person reading it actually sees as well.
But hospital administrators are going to think, well, thanks a lot. Thanks for dumping on us yet another thing that we have to abide by, yet another thing that we're going to have to put on the desks of our HR departments. I mean, goodness knows how on earth it will actually be enforced. I mean, do people get a warning, a verbal warning, then a written warning, and on the third offence, they get fired for it? It's all a bit of a mess, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's a whole process around how to deal with this properly. But from my understanding from looking through the report is that some trusts already do have statements on this kind of thing. So one question is about how successful they are and how they deal with it, and whether there's room for learning, because the overall thrust of trying to address racism and discrimination and to make the NHS inclusive and to focus on what the NHS is about, which is providing quality healthcare, then it may well be that there is opportunities from what other trusts have done, whether they're doing it well, or if they've tried and not done so well, that also provides opportunities to learn and try and see if there's space to implement this in a way that achieves its goals in a way that's kind of fair and reasonable.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Josh. That's Dr. Josh Parker there from Lancaster University. Right, let's go straight to your calls. I'm sure you'll have some very strong views one way or another on this. Let's start off with Jay in Oldham. Jay, very good evening.
Hi, good evening, Iain. Thank you for taking my call. Long-time listener, first-time calling. My question is, obviously, I work for the NHS. On our badge, we wear loads of pins, 75 year on the NHS Excellence. We do wear as well Pride pin, obviously supporting the LGBTQ community. I myself do wear a flag of Palestine in solidarity with Palestine, even before 7th of October. I don't deal with patients directly. So my question is, are all NHS staff will be stopped wearing any symbols, badge? Like, if you want to ban political symbols and religious symbols, I think you have to ban the whole thing. Where will they draw the line? Which I understand, obviously, anti-Semitism has been growing for the past few years, since 7th of October. But where do you draw the line? Where are we stopping wearing the badges, celebrating NHS, celebrating LGBT, are we stopping wearing as well, like poppy, for example? Some people have pins in a badge, are we stopping wearing?
Well, can you imagine the outrage if they tried to stop that?
Exactly, that's my question, but where do you draw the line? Because wearing a flag of a country, will that be considered anti-Semitism? Will we ban the flags as well?
Well, I don't know the answer to this. This is why I said I think it is in some ways a sledgehammer to crack a nut, and I'm not dismissing the problem of anti-Semitism whatsoever by saying that. But you've just highlighted the problem. I mean, I think poppy badges. You could argue, I suppose, that if you actually wore the paper poppies, there could be some sort of health risk in that as opposed to a metal badge. But I mean, they're not political badges, are they? They're commemorative badges, just as the badges to celebrate the NHS are. So I don't think they would be banned. But you're right that there is a question about the Pride badge, I think, because it could certainly be argued that is making a political statement, even if you would hope it was one that 99% of people would buy into.
Yes, and it just says NHS on it with all the colours. It just says NHS.
Yeah.
Will that be offensive to somebody?
Well, I don't know. You see, are they going to let individual hospitals or GP surgeries decide what is appropriate, or will there be national guidelines on this? Jay, thank you very much. John's in Edinburgh. Hello, John.
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say? I
think you're spot on with this on the sledgehammer to crack a nut issue. I think it's an interesting one because I'm going to be really annoying, be devil's advocate and sit on the fence a bit here, but I thought your earlier caller who was talking about anti-Semitism made a really interesting point where he said one of the benefits of it was that by imposing it wouldn't just affect a clampdown on anti-Semitism, but it would also hopefully affect racism of many sorts. And that's an interesting point. But on the other hand, I would say that he also let himself down a bit, I thought, when he said, look, when we're in hospital, we don't want to be thinking about this, that or the other or anything. But this is exactly what that's about. It's saying somehow we are being forced to think, we're being forced to assume the worst of a doctor. If they're wearing a symbol that we personally don't agree with, that we're going to be thinking about that more than the treatment we're getting. I personally wouldn't be doing that. I would think the most sensible people wouldn't do that. It seems a bit odd to me to suggest that that's the case, but I'm also conscious that that's kind of easy for me to say because I've not suffered prejudice in the way that, as you just mentioned, we don't want to diminish concerns about things like anti-Semitism. On the other hand, for me, I would personally say that if they want to go ahead with this, fine, go ahead with it. But I would want it to be everything across the board. I would not want to see religious symbols on doctors either. If anything, I probably respect a political symbol more because I would think someone's put some rational thought into what their politics are, which isn't always the case with a religious symbol. And you mentioned the poppy there. Unfortunately, I would say the poppy probably has been politicised. We've seen in the last 20 years the shouting down of people on television if they're not wearing a poppy, the pressures for people to have it on for a month, etc. It's not the symbol it once was to commemorate the British Legion, and the British Legion themselves spoken out about this a few times, which I think's really sad. So, yeah, either do it the whole hog, absolutely every symbol banned, or don't do it at all, would be my message on it.
John, thank you very much indeed. Mark says, it's comical how hard you must work to justify this Israeli government's actions. I'd love you to tell me, Mark, how I've tried to do that in the last half an hour. I think I've been quite balanced on this. I've used the phrase sledgehammer to crack a nut. So you're just, I'm afraid, indulging in your own prejudices there. Let's go to Hassan in Westminster. Hello, Hassan.
Yeah, hi, Ian. Yes, I agree. This is a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Obviously, racism has to be combated. I think Jewish people should be very comfortable and proud of their religious background and should not be having to hide it. But I think this is racism is on the rise, all sorts of racism, and also the NHS. I think there are particular ethnicities which are being failed by the NHS in health outcomes, especially the black community and others. So this is a problem, but I think trying to link it to displays of Palestinian solidarity, etc., is not the right thing. I think this is something which is Lord Man's sort of one of his favorite topics. He's gone around conflating these things repeatedly. So I think we are a free society. I think political symbols, religious symbols should be allowed. I think what is critical is that there should be no discrimination by a Palestine-wearing badge doctor against his Jewish patient. But I mean, that should be cracked down in as malpractice anyway. So
What about if we're doing an election campaign and nurses and doctors wear badges saying vote Conservative or vote Labour or vote Reform? I mean, I would feel very uncomfortable about allowing that.
I guess, yes. I think political campaigns within the workplace, etc., I guess that's a bit excessive. But if it's a...
But if a badge says Free Palestine, that is a political campaign, isn't it?
Well, then so is the Pride badge, right? That's also a political campaign.
Well, I think, is it though?
Well, yeah.
I mean, you can argue that it is, but you can certainly argue that it isn't.
Yeah. Look, so yeah, I guess then I think we should err on the side of freedom of expression and let people do that. And I think there's also one of the things that you mentioned is that, look, there is a certain prioritization of certain forms of racism or actions against certain forms of racism. And I think there is far greater racism against black people and brown people in society and also in the NHS, and that is.
Well, I think if you're a Jewish person living in this country at the moment, I think you would think that you were up there in terms of that discrimination and racism against you.
Look, I'm sure they feel that way. I'm not sure what the statistics actually show, but the other thing is that for black and brown people, it's impossible to hide their race, and so they are much easier targets, right? And a Jewish person, as long as they don't wear a Jewish symbol, they're not. They blend into the wider society, while black and brown people can't. So they stick out.
Okay, Hassan, thank you. Ian says, what about tattoos? We're not going there in this phone-in. I remember the last phone-in I did on should tattoos be banned in the workplace. Let's put it this way. It took a bit of a turn. It's 7:32 on LBC News Headlines with Matt Hewitt.
The Prime Minister says he was humbled to meet the family of murdered student Henry Novak as the police handling of the case comes under further scrutiny. He's promised to be unflinching in taking whatever action is required to right the wrongs. A member of safety staff's in a serious condition in hospital after being shot with a crossbow at the University of Surrey in Guildford. A former student there has been arrested. And the Health Secretary has confirmed that the NHS will issue new rules banning staff from wearing political badges. It follows the government accepting all of the recommendations of an independent review into anti-Semitism in the health service by Labour peer Lord Mann. LBC weather. Showers this evening, gradually becoming more focused across northern and western areas tonight. Breezy in the north, lows of 7 to 13 degrees.
This is LBC.
Or something depicting the opposite side of your argument. Now, I'd like to think that we've become much more tolerant in recent years on these things, but I suspect there are rules in the Northern Irish NHS as to what is allowed in these circumstances. But before we come back to your calls, let's talk about Keir Starmer, because he's vowed to right the wrongs of Henry Novak's murder after his family met with both the Prime Minister and the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch today. Well, Aggie Chambray joins us, our deputy political editor. Aggie, how did these two meetings go?
Well, Kemi Badenoch met the family first, and then Sir Keir Starmer met Henry Novak's family, Mark, Lucy and Katie, in Downing Street this afternoon. He said he was profoundly humbled to meet them, to see their dignity and strength in the face of unimaginable pain. He said he was moved to learn more about Henry, his kindness, his warmth and his love of football, and is grateful to his family. He talks about the fact that Henry deserves a legacy that goes beyond this awful tragedy, and he is committed to making that happen. He talks about the difficult questions that need to be answered about the way the police handled Henry's murder. The Independent Office for Police Conduct are investigating. But he said, we will be unflinching in taking whatever action is required to right the wrongs in this case, and talking about the duty now to ensure lessons are learned and that justice justice is delivered, and we choose unity and progress over division and hatred. And as I say, he had that meeting this afternoon. Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative Party leader, also met with the Novak family this morning. Kemi Badenoch talked about it being a heartbreaking meeting, and the family being extraordinary, very brave, and they want the public response to be about getting justice for Henry. Kemi Badenoch also today posted on social media that they told her that they want common sense to return to policing. Kemi Badenoch then spoke to LBC this afternoon and explained why she thinks there isn't common sense in policing at the moment.
I do think that the police are now very confused about how to police, because a lot of that guidance, a lot of that training does not comply with the law. The law says treat everyone equally. There is no hierarchy of groups. And yet you look at the guidance and it actually creates a hierarchy of groups. And it's not just around race policing. I've talked about policing being different when it comes to how we treat trans activist protests and gender critical women, the pro-Palestine protests versus pro-Israel protests, differences even between how Gypsy Romani travellers are policed. So let's look at what's going wrong with the guidance rather than try and pit groups against each other.
That was Kemi Badenoch speaking there, and those two meetings took place today. But Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, has also just said in the last few minutes that he and members of his party have agreed to meet the Novak family too, although that meeting hasn't happened yet. He also said in an interview, I believe for the first time, Iain, that he condemned the violence that we saw on Tuesday night in Southampton. He said, of course I condemn all violence, I always have. But then he talked once again about two-tier policing and talking about ending up with lots and lots of angry, young, white, working class men, and talking about Prime Minister's questions, which we discussed yesterday, Iain, and how he believed the entire political class were against him, screaming, shouting, and the look of fear on their faces, real fear, because he thinks that they think that he is more in touch with the great British public than they are on this.
And Kemi Badenoch has got into a little bit of a spat with Doreen Lawrence, the mother of Stephen Lawrence, hasn't she? Because I think she invoked his name by saying, well, that was a seminal moment in British policing, and so is this. And Baroness Lawrence has objected to her son's name being used in this way. And Kemi Badenoch has said she's not going to apologise.
That's right, Iain. So Kemi Badenoch spoke to the Daily Mail newspaper earlier in the week and said Henry's murder and the police's botched response must be a seminal moment for Britain, on a par with the murder of Stephen Lawrence. Doreen Lawrence, Baroness Lawrence, of course, the mother of Stephen Lawrence, talked about her condolences going out to the Henry Novak family, but said that when her son was murdered, there was nobody standing up and asking for judgment to happen to him. And the mere fact, she says, that the leader of the opposition in the other place, she was talking in the House of Lords, can use my son's name in referring to reform. It took 20 years and more for anybody to understand the murder of my son, to have anyone convicted. Kemi Badenoch, as you say today, speaking to LBC, has said that she won't renege on her comments. She won't apologise for them and thinks she was right to say what she did in relation to Stephen Lawrence.
Aggie, thank you very much indeed. That's Aggie Chambray, LBC's Deputy Political Editor. Right, let's go back to your calls. If you've just tuned in, we're talking about a report by Lord John Mann, which is recommending that political badges in the workplace in the NHS should be banned, and the government seems to be going along with this. I'm asking what your views are. Ibrahim is in Camden. Good evening.
Evening. Hope you're well. I think it's a bit extreme. I think you can get to another extreme. I'm a bit confused by it as well, because personally, I think if there were no badges in the NHS, if everybody was wearing a plain uniform, it'd be fine. But that's not where we're at. There are a lot of badges. There's different badges. And I think it can go to an extreme where if people are forced to now remove all these things, whether that's the Pride flag, whether that's the Ukrainian flag, whether that's the Free Palestine wristband or something like that, whatever it is, it could lead to more anti-Semitism, because everyone's going to know that the reason they're being forced to remove all of this is because of this new policy that's being pushed through.
I don't disagree with that at all in terms of what some of the effects might be. But another effect might be that Jewish patients who feel uncomfortable at the moment being faced with somebody who's wearing something that they might consider anti-Semitic, even if the wearer of it didn't mean it in that way. It would be argued that will make for a more harmonious place. And in the end, it's the patients that are the most important people here.
They are, but potentially it could completely reverse and go the other way, where somebody who has no issues with the Jewish community at all then has to assist the Jewish patient, but they're being told off for wearing a political symbol that prior to this had nothing against the Jewish community or Judaism or even Israel. But now they can't represent that political symbol. They can't wear it anymore. Now they might just end up, having this adverse reaction to this Jewish patient. I don't think it's been fully thought through, to be honest.
Again, I'm not sure I disagree with you on that one, because I think it's the law of unintended consequences, isn't it? You do something because you think you're doing the right thing, and then you find out that it has an unfortunate consequence down the road. Thank you very much, Ibrahim. Charlie says, I just feel that every time you state in the NHS, you're forgetting it's a workplace. All workplaces have a dress code. No, they don't, actually, but many do, you're right. All workplaces have policies to abide by, and the old expression, leave your personal life at home, comes to mind. You could argue that last point under mental health and well-being to say that you needed to talk through your problems with your co-worker, but that would make your co-worker your friend and do it during your break. Other than that, you go to work and represent your company and not your private life or politics. What do you want to wear in your own time? Crack on, my friend. Look, it depends on the workplace, doesn't it? All sorts of... in my workplace, everyone decides what they're going to wear. It doesn't particularly matter in this workplace if somebody's wearing a badge saying this, that, or the other. If I sat here wearing a jacket with some overt political campaign pin on my jacket, I used to wear a Ukrainian flag on my jacket. I haven't got it on at the moment. I would certainly wear a poppy, though I don't bow to this thing that you have to wear a poppy for a whole month. I wear it from the 1st of November to the 11th, and I think that's perfectly sufficient. I don't believe in this whole thing that you have to wear it like from the middle of October. So look, everyone makes their own choice, don't they? Let's go to who is it? David in Kentish Town. Hello, David.
Hi, hello. Thank you for taking my call.
Hi, what would you like to say?
I know the discussions about the NHS. I'm personally a teacher in a state school in London, and I am a Jewish man that chooses not to wear my kippah to work because I feel slightly unsafe at work.
Have you ever worn it to work?
No.
No.
Not. Well, I've only worked in a school for a few years now, like since October 7th, so
right.
No, I haven't.
No, but I think there are a lot of Jewish people who have worn it in the past but feel that they can't anymore.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that part of the reason why I feel slightly unsafe at work is because some members of staff wear some certain badges and all that kind of stuff. I think for me personally, I don't think there should be a ban on all badges. I personally don't have a problem with someone wearing a Palestinian flag, but there's certain badges that do trigger me in a certain way, and make me feel unsafe. Like, for example, watermelon badges that say the watermelon with the resist on it, which to me implies that you agree with Palestinian resistance, and Palestinian resistance historically has been murdering Jewish people, and that makes me feel unsafe. I know many people that have died in terrorist attacks, many friends, families, and it just makes me feel unsafe in the workplace, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right on that. If somebody wore a badge saying, I don't know, go Hamas, for example, I can't think any employer would put up with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you would hope they wouldn't anyway. It's like there's this case, I can't remember her name now, this pro-Palestinian doctor who's been had up before the General Medical Council and had her licence revoked, I think. She seems to think that it's perfectly okay for her to go on social media and effectively, well, I'm going to be careful what I say here, but advocate very extreme anti-Jewish and anti-Israeli actions. And I'm thinking, well, if I was a Jewish person being treated by this doctor, I would feel actually very uncomfortable and very unsafe.
Yeah. There's certain dynamics get created in the workplace, and especially when you are in the care sector and the health sector, education, whatnot. Like it's very easy to feel unsafe in front of, especially when you're asking care from someone else. It's very easy to fall into a place where you feel unsafe. This person's meant to look after me, but at the same time, he's making me feel like I can't trust them because I don't know exactly what they think about me. So yeah, it's just a very complex situation to kind of try and handle and manage.
Thank you very much indeed, David. On Cross Question, in 15 minutes, we have the Labour MP, Dame Siobhan McDonough, Emma Sinclair, businesswoman and entrepreneur, Samuel Kasumi, social entrepreneur. God, they get about these social entrepreneurs, don't they? And Sebastian Salak, Labour councillor and campaigner and a former political journalist. They'll be here to answer your calls after 8 o'clock. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 7:47.
LBC This Morning on Nick Ferrari at Breakfast.
The police watchdog now understandably under pressure to fast-track the investigation into the officers who handcuffed Henry Nowak as he lay dying. What does the IOPC, this police watchdog, need to do now?
Why isn't Parliament right now passing laws to make it an offence for everybody to carry a weapon?
There's something fundamentally wrong, isn't there, with policing in this country?
They're not allowed to do a job in terms of what they're meant to be doing.
Nick Ferrari at Breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
But if it's really difficult to implement, you're creating another administrative problem for NHS managers. When what we really want to do is to let the NHS get on with treating patients, don't we? Alan's in Reading. Alan, hi.
Hi. Iain, I just wanted to say that I think this badge thing is a bit crazy. But also, like, if you went to the NHS, I think most people would agree they get fairly good treatment and, you know, would not be worried about who is treating them because the people are dedicated. And I think, you know, is it going to get to the point where we have a badge that says, I only treat white people, or, you know, I don't want to treat, you know, Chinese people or brown people? Yeah.
You may not believe this, Alan, but I know this to be true because when I was in hospital a couple of years ago, I was talking to a Nigerian nurse about this.
Right.
And she said that every single week she comes across a patient who insists on being cared for by a white nurse rather than a Nigerian nurse. And I said, I was really shocked by this. And I said, what, you mean every single week that happens to you? And she said, absolutely right.
Wow. I mean, you know, there are exceptional cases like the Harold Shipman thing, and, you know, there has been some people who have done operations on people unnecessarily, but it's a tiny, tiny minority. And I think most of the people that you see in whether it's A&E or a hospital are just caring people. That's why they do the job. You don't have to do that job, but you have to be dedicated and caring to do, I think, any kind of medical job in the NHS. So it's kind of, I don't know, a bit crazy.
I just remembered an anecdote which is completely pertinent to this conversation. In 1981, when Ronald Reagan was shot, and he was rushed to hospital, and he was on the operating table and about to be put under, and he just said to all the doctors and nurses present, "I hope you're all Republicans," at which they all found very funny, and it turned out that most of them weren't. But, I mean, look, as you say, 99.9% of NHS staff are professionals. They are there. They are in the NHS to look after people and treat people, and they don't care if somebody is black, brown, Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, Reform, whatever. You get the same treatment, and that's exactly how it should be. Alan, thank you. Mel is in Norwich. Hello, Mel.
Hi, Ian. Right. Regarding badges in the NHS, I don't think any badges should be worn within the NHS when you are dealing directly with patients, because it's health and safety. Generally, elderly patients with psychiatric problems can be very aggressive, and they can swing their arms about, as can patients in A&E, and they can become an issue. Now, I was raised never to discuss politics. If I was to go to a workplace wearing a badge...
Would you pick the wrong radio station then, Mel, haven't you?
Why? Well...
That's what we do mainly.
No, I don't mean... Yeah, I know that. But what I'm saying is, to the general public, when you're working in a workplace, you don't wear a badge saying who you vote for or who you support. That's discussing your own view. And that does upset people, as we know. So, no, I don't think badges should be worn in the workplace when it comes to political.
Even religious symbols?
Yeah, because people can get funny about religion as well, can't they?
Yeah,
I certainly don't think sheiks should be allowed to carry these kupka, whatever they are.
Kippahs, yes.
Yeah, them. I don't think they should. I don't think anybody should be allowed to carry anything that can be used when an offensive weapon, regardless of whether it's their tradition or religion or not.
Well, that refers back to a discussion we had a couple of days ago. Thank you very much indeed, Mel. Kev says, I work in the transport industry, and I know there is a bit of a crossover with the NHS where badges are concerned. A lot of people wear national flag badges to indicate to passengers or patients in the NHS what languages they speak. This has proved to be very helpful over many years. I didn't know that, but that does sound eminently sensible, doesn't it? I mean, that would be ridiculous if those badges were outlawed, I guess. Let's go to Ryan, who's in, oh my goodness, Donaghadee in Northern Ireland. I've mangled that, haven't I, Ryan?
Challenging you there in your pronunciations of Northern Ireland towns.
Go on, what is it then?
Just trying to bring you some context from the Northern Ireland history. Obviously, emblems, badges, flags have a significance in Northern Ireland. So as far as public bodies in Northern Ireland is concerned, they have a Section 75 obligation, it's called. So they have to promote good relations, in particular in the political religious space, which means that when they're developing policy for their staff, the wearing of emblems is very strictly controlled to try and promote a neutral environment in the workplace. That plays out sometimes with some issues, particularly in relation to, for example, the wearing of poppies, because there's a misunderstanding of the history of military in Northern Ireland. Obviously, some parts of the community associate the British Army with the Troubles, notwithstanding the fact that the poppy relates to the First and Second World War, and many Irish people died in the First World War. So you can see even where the wearing of a poppy in an NHS environment can give rise to issues. But we have specific legislation developed as part of the Good Friday Agreement, the Northern Ireland Act, just to try and make it more of an independent, impartial workplace.
So
and then that's got to be balanced, of course, against the freedom of expression where people do want to wear emblems or images. So it's a difficult balancing exercise, but the Northern Ireland experience is such that they've learnt from the issues of flags and the division of flags and the use of flags for sectarian reasons wrapped up as a freedom of expression.
Ryan, thank you for informing us about the situation in Northern Ireland. Philip's in Saffron Walden. Hello, Philip.
Yeah, good afternoon or good evening. Yeah, I had to go and have a hearing test about 2 years ago. And when I went in, the young lady, Chinese lady, she said to me, "Are you okay with me doing your hearing test?" And I said, "Pardon?" She said, "Are you okay for me to do your hearing test?" I said, "You're qualified, aren't you?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, of course I am." I said, "Do you mean to say you have people refuse you to do their hearing test?" She said, "Yes." I said, "We should tell them to go and wait another 6 months to have it done."
I mean, it beggars belief, doesn't it?
I was absolutely, I mean, I can be a bit outspoken, but I really didn't know what to say. And she was such an inoffensive lady. And I just thought, what, you come here to have your hearing done because you've got a hearing problem, and then you're saying, I don't want you to do my hearing test.
Well, it goes back to what I was saying about the Nigerian nurse that I was talking to. It's exactly the same thing. And people should not have to face that kind of bigotry, should they?
No. But if you're, it's a situation where they're qualified to do the job, what is the problem?
Well, we will leave that question hanging because I don't think there shouldn't be a problem, but it does make you lose faith in humanity when you hear stories like that. Thank you very much, Philip. Right, coming up in the next hour, it's Thursday's Cross Question, the last one of the week. We will be joined by the Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden, Dame Siobhan McDonough, Emma Sinclair, businesswoman and entrepreneur, who's the chief executive of the software company Enterprise Alumni. Samuel Kasumu is a social entrepreneur who was a civil society advisor to Boris Johnson while he was Prime Minister, and Sebastian Salek, former Labour councillor and campaigner and a former political journalist. Lots to talk about today. 0345 6060 973. You can phone in and ask about any subject you like. Open brackets, within reason, close brackets.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, Sir Keir Starmer says a country must choose unity and progress over division and hatred. The Prime Minister says he was humbled to meet the parents of murdered, handcuffed teenager Henry Novak in Downing Street earlier. He says the 18-year-old deserves a legacy that goes beyond this awful tragedy.
Just listen again to what the family are asking of us, which is to remain calm, to show the leadership that's needed here and not allow this case to be used to whip up division. It's clear there are questions to be asked and the IOPC is looking at that.
A man's in hospital after being shot with a crossbow. It happened in Guildford in Surrey this morning. A 21-year-old Saudi national's been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. Vladimir Putin says a peace proposal put forward by the US president could be the basis for a deal with Ukraine. But the Russian president says Donald Trump still needs to persuade Kyiv. Ukraine's president offered Putin a bilateral meeting and in an open letter called on him to end the war. And Liverpool have confirmed the appointment of Andoni Iraola as the Premier League club's new head coach. The former Bournemouth manager takes over following the sacking of Arne Slot. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed up 28 points at 10,360. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather, showers this evening, becoming more focused around northern and western areas by tonight. Breezy in the north, lows of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, very good evening. It's 2 minutes past 8 on LBC. Welcome to Thursday's Cross Question. On my panel tonight, we have one of our most regular guests. She hasn't been on for a while, Dame Siobhan McDonnell, Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden. Next to her is Samuel Kasumi, social entrepreneur. He was a civil service... I keep saying civil service advisor. Wouldn't that have been wonderful? Civil society advisor to Boris Johnson. To my right, Emma Sinclair, businesswoman and entrepreneur, who's the chief executive of the software company Enterprise Alumni. And next to her is Sebastian Salak, former Labour councillor and campaigner and a former political journalist. This is all, too many formers here. We want to know what you do now. We'll find out in a moment. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 and you can watch us on the LBC app, Global Player or the LBC YouTube channel.
0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Right, let's go to our first question. It's from Donna in Ruislip. Should NHS staff be banned from wearing political badges on shift? Would you reject care from a doctor who wore a badge promoting beliefs that you disagree with? This is what we've been talking about for the last hour after Lord Mann's report today, recommending that all political badges in the NHS should be banned. Siobhan.
I think John's absolutely right. I don't think there's a place for political badges on your uniform. It's about treating everybody the same. I'm not sure it's so much that if you go into A&E, you'll be happy to be seen by any doctor, I think, wearing anything. But it's about people feeling that patients feeling they will be treated equally. I had an email from a Jewish constituent, Helena, I don't have many Jewish constituents, telling me that she was really worried that she as a Jewish person wouldn't be treated properly or fairly in the NHS. And whether or not that's true, what a terrible thought to think somebody would actually think that.
I mean, I think this has come about because there have been examples of where some doctors or nurses have worn pro-Palestinian badges, so Jewish patients have felt slightly uncomfortable about that. But I don't know what you think, but I'm always slightly uncomfortable about introducing a new rule because of one thing, because it's the law of unintended consequences, isn't it? Because it can lead to... I mean, what is a political badge? Is a pride badge a political badge? Or is it something that we would all think, well, that's not controversial?
Well, I'm slightly surprised, though. There is a practice of wearing badges on your uniform. Other than if you're a nurse, my mum used to wear a badge talking about her registration. I don't think there is a place for any other paraphernalia on your uniform.
Okay, Samuel?
Yeah, I think I'm minded to agree. I don't think you should be wearing any kind of badge unless it's focused on your work and the NHS, whether you're just a registration or whether you're supporting the fact that we have a National Health Service. I don't think you should have any flags, or maybe a British flag or an English flag, perhaps. Yeah, but beyond that, no.
But as we heard in Northern Ireland, for some communities, that might be controversial.
Exactly. And I think that the focus.
And what about religious symbols? Because that's been an issue in the past where a nurse has worn a crucifix. And somebody's objected to that, or a Jewish person might wear a Star of David, not as the Israeli flag, but as a symbol of their religion.
Yeah, I think on balance, no. I'm a Christian, but I think if you have a cross, you should be very comfortable having it underneath. That's fine, but you shouldn't necessarily have to display your faith to anyone. I think it's very important that people have a comfort level, that whoever's looking after them is doing it objectively and to the best of their abilities, and we don't need to raise any of those doubts in people's minds, particularly when they're at the most vulnerable periods in their lives.
Emma?
I couldn't agree more. I think pro-Palestine badges are unequivocally controversial, or they are to me and many of my friends and many of my Jewish friends who experience now weekly direct anti-Semitism. So broadly speaking, someone's wearing a cross or a Star of David or something that, reflects their religion or ethnicity, that's wonderful and that's to be applauded and respected. But anything beyond that, I understand why people are nervous about that. I hear it all too often. You mentioned you've got one constituent. I have huge circles of Jewish friends and I'm wearing a Star of David today. I would be nervous and uncomfortable at this point as a result of what's been happening in the United Kingdom. Poppy, yes. Your badge that says what you do for a living or what country you come from, lovely. Anything beyond that, especially for me, something pro-Palestinian, shouldn't be allowed.
Sebastian?
It's a hard one for me because, like everybody in this room, I'm fiercely political and very open about my views. But I think on this occasion, it's probably sensible to disallow that in this context. And the reason for that is this. In different parts of our lives, we wear different masks. You'll wear a different mask at work than you will do at home. And when I'm treated by somebody, I want to be treated by a doctor or a nurse and not an activist, even if it's something I agree with. And I think it's professional to present as the role that you will carry out in that situation rather than any kind of political identity.
Well, let's take up a follow-up call, given that you've all agreed with each other on this one. Let's go to Sarah, who is in Hampstead. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Ian. I go to work every morning drinking my coffee from my travel mug, and it's branded with the Conservative Party tree logo, and I got it from working the 2019. I like it. I never considered that it would be offensive to people. Is that just a faux pas, or is that offensive?
What kind of work?
You ask on the panel.
What kind of work do you do?
I now work in the city, completely non-political work.
And has anybody ever had a go at you for drinking out of a Conservative branded mug?
No, no one's ever had a go at me, but they do sort of...
Maybe they'll be inciting pity, Sarah.
You're probably amongst friends. If you work in the city.
I mean, context is everything, isn't it? And I mean, if you work in the media... I mean, for example, I don't think anybody's going to object to anybody wearing any kind of badge. I suppose, given that, OK, I'm on the radio, but it's all live streamed now, so people can see what I wear. If I wore a massive sort of vote, whatever badge, I mean, that wouldn't be appropriate, would it?
No.
So I may do it.
And maybe Ofcom would have something to say about it.
Oh, they certainly would during an election time. Or in fact, they probably would at any other time. But... There will be circumstances in the NHS where we had somebody text in earlier to say, well, hang on a minute, what about all of the doctors and nurses who wear badges to show where they come from, which means that they can speak the language? And we know that, I mean, when I go and have my eyes done at the Chelsea and Westminster, virtually everyone in the waiting room may speak a different language, and it's quite actually important for them to be able to see, well, OK, I'm going to talk to you because I can see that you can understand me.
I think that's quite basic and factual, right? You can tell what colour someone's hair is if they have hair.
Thank you.
That's not directed at you. I just happen to be looking at you.
You just happen to be looking at me.
Yes, I did, because you're in charge of the programme. But it's like when you travel on an airline. I heard a rumour. But, you travel on an airline, people have a badge. I mean, that's quite straightforward.
But what if it was a Palestinian badge, Emma?
That's not a country that's officially recognised by everybody, is it?
It's recognised by 155 different countries at the UN.
If that's where you're from, that's where you're from. That's your country of origin. For me, it would make a difference where you were from. If you're wearing a badge that says the country it carries your passport, that's just factual. I
can sense there's not going to be any lack of consensus on this issue. So should we move on to a different subject?
Yeah.
Right, let's do that. Simon says, why has it taken Nigel Farage almost 2 days to condemn the riots in Southampton? Does his hesitancy suggest a tacit approval for those who cause trouble, or a wish not to deter them from voting reform? And does it rule him out from being suitable to one day lead this country? Well, we talked about this a lot on the programme last night, and I was quite critical of Nigel Farage for not condemning the violence in Southampton, but he has done so today. Sebastian.
It's so emblematic, isn't it, of what reform does. They find opportunities to whip up division, to stir hate, and they go for it. And on this occasion, it's sadly the death of a young man. I feel slightly like he incited those protests when he stood up and said that we should react with, was it cold hate? I've got to be careful about my words. I know others have got it wrong. That's not the way to react to a murder. You shouldn't tell people how to feel.
Cold rage.
Cold rage, there we go, which I found incredibly concerning. And after that, we saw violence against police officers, and you've got people who aren't even involved in it being targeted, who've now got into hiding.
Well, we haven't got a Reform UK person on the panel tonight, so let me play devil's advocate here. The phrase cold rage, I mean, I think everyone reacted with a bit of rage to what happened. I mean, I think people were genuinely angry about it. A cold rage, I think, if we're going to be semantic about it, is different from hot rage. A cold rage, you could argue, means a sort of, a rage where you don't actually react in a hot rage way. But as I'm trying to explain that, I'm tying myself up in knots.
Yeah, I don't think reform does that level of nuance, and I don't think the general public do either. Cold rage, hot rage, that's a new differentiation to me. It sounds like Southport all over again, of Farage saying, God, wouldn't it be terrible if all of this played out? Wouldn't it be terrible if there were riots this summer? And he's not quite going as far as to say we should do it, but he's not far off, is he?
Emma?
I run a business. I'm not in politics. Words do matter. I watched what Farage said in Westminster. He's not in Westminster very often, so I'm assuming he came to say those words specifically to cause a little bit of a ruckus. But I mean, I think you're right. There is cold rage. I mean, it's just astoundingly tragic what's happened. I don't think you can blame Nigel Farage for what's happening on the streets and people being angry. That doesn't feel right and fair to me. He articulated what people are, but he did seem to go a little bit far in what he said. I don't listen to politics all day long and how everybody articulates everything in the House, but he's not responsible. But Reform certainly have a way of communicating and certainly have a demographic seemingly that they're looking to appeal to. So presumably he's done just that and successfully.
Samuel?
Yeah, I don't think you can necessarily blame Nigel Farage alone, but you can and should blame the whole political establishment for the situation we're in. The reality is the murder was super tragic, very sad, but we always have to be very careful not to extrapolate one very sad incident and use it to generalise a whole institution, which is a police force, and also the atmosphere for where the nation is as a whole. And I think that you've seen a lot of that across the political divide. Even though those who might sound a bit more sensible and nuanced, they're not. They're making sweeping conclusions. I remember many years ago, I used to chair the largest debate tour in the UK. And I remember Mark Duggan was murdered, and it was 2011. And so I'd go around the whole country and I'd ask this question: how many times do you think a young black man had been killed at the hands of the police, either through being gunned down or what have you? And people would say 100 times over the last 20 years. Some would say 1,000 times. Some would say 5,000 times. And at the time, the actual figure was about 11 over 30 years. And so this is the reality. We have very tragic situations, and people often, particularly our politicians who are looking to seek out to get some kind of advantage from this, will make it sound like the whole situation is so bad and so tragic. And that's not the case. We have police officers who are human, who have biases, but they work incredibly hard. They do make mistakes at times, but we have to be super careful. And most of our politicians, probably all of our politicians at the front of the media, haven't clothe themselves in glory with this situation.
Siobhan, your chance to cloak yourself in glory.
Imagine your son dying in those circumstances. He was the first in his family to have gone to university. They must have been so proud of him, and for his life to end this way is just so tragic. And for the family to be as dignified as they have been says a lot about them. Nigel Farage, he called a press conference to give this statement. He knew exactly...
An emergency press conference.
Yeah, he knew exactly what he was doing. And I would suggest it probably didn't have anything to do with this poor young man who died in such tragic circumstances. And I think you're right, does none of us any good, but it's pretty shocking. And, the riots in Southampton, a tragedy happens. The last thing you want is people marauding through your streets, injuring, I think it was about 14 police officers.
11.
It just piles bad upon worse, doesn't it?
Well, can I congratulate you, because I think that's the first time in the 8-year history of Cross Question that we've covered 3 questions in the first quarter. So well done. Let's keep it up. 0345 6060 973 if you would like to take part in the programme. It's 16 minutes past 8.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
Why do you need consultation? Who's going to say no?
Straight to the point.
Let's see.
Why let's see? This is what I don't understand.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Why won't they listen to the most successful living Labour Prime Minister? Arguably the most successful Labour Prime Minister of all time.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store.
Sittingbourne. Hello, John.
Hello.
What would you like to ask?
I was just wondering, do you believe that two-tier policing exists? Because I am quite worried about it.
Samuel.
God, blimey, why me? I would say that police officers are human beings, just like all of us. That means we have good days, bad days. It means we have biases, blind spots. And it means sometimes we might make generalizations based on our own experiences or experiences of others, right? And so I think it's a bit too simplistic to say that a police officer or all police officers should and could and will behave in exactly the same way in every single situation. It just doesn't exist. Now, I guess what you must layer on top of that is all of our experiences are also quite different. So I'm a black guy who grew up in the London borough of Barnet, and I live in Hertfordshire. My experience is very different from a young black man that lives in Brixton or Peckham in London. And a white working class individual in left behind town's experience is very different to a white middle class man that lives in inner city London or Zone 2 or whatever, right? So I think the answer to the question is it's super oversimplistic and unhelpful to use the term. Police officers have to make split decisions every day, and they're human beings. They are not robots. And so therefore there's a need to constantly remind them that they may have blind spots. And when there are tragic incidents, which again are not that often, it is important for us to be very calm about how we respond to that. The answer doesn't necessarily mean that police officers across the land have to fundamentally change how they behave, but it should mean that we should look again and we should ask critical questions, but in a calm way. And in my time in Number 10, I was involved in setting up independent scrutiny oversight boards for police forces across the land. And my conclusion was, these are human beings that are incredibly brave, and if we can't put ourselves in their position, which most of us cannot and will not, then we have to be very careful not to judge them in ways that are completely unhelpful and might demotivate them and might prevent other people from deciding to join police forces. That's my view. I hope it doesn't sound like a politician's answer, but it's more nuanced than people allow for it in public debate, in my view.
Sebastian.
It's hard because, as Samuel alludes, we are talking about a collection of people, and it's very difficult to generalise. But the data is really clear. And to answer your question directly, yes, I do think we have two-tier policing. If you are black, you are 8 times more likely to be handcuffed when compliant. You're 5 times more likely to have force used against you. You're 4 times more likely to be shot dead by police. And you're 8 times more likely as a child to be strip searched. Now, those are some pretty damning statistics. I'm personally very uncomfortable with them. And there are many aspects of policing that feel like we haven't come very far from the 70s at all. Now, look, that doesn't mean that this is a damning of all police officers. They work incredibly hard. They do brilliant work. Some of them are very, very brave indeed. But when we're forced with figures, or when we're faced with figures like that, it's pause for thought. Unfortunately, for those on the right, particularly within Reform, who are trying to make hay out of this, it's not the kind of two-tier policing that they're talking about, and that's very uncomfortable for them indeed.
You got to contextualise that data as well. As I said, look, I live in Hertfordshire. My experience as a black guy in Hertfordshire is not the same as the experience of many young black folks in areas where there are unfortunately high levels of knife crime, where you're more likely, if you're a black man that looks like me in certain areas, to be both a victim and a perpetrator of knife crime. And so if you're a police officer in that context, you have to respond in ways that might not feel very ideal. And so I think data is very important. Data can be striking, but the stories are also a lot more nuanced than I guess people allow for it. Now, I remember when I was in Number 10, and there was an incident where a young guy got on the train, and he was in Croydon, East Croydon. He was chased into East Croydon by 2 other boys, and he was stabbed, and he was killed, right? And I remember talking to people in that community, and they were very clear. You know, if they could get more police officers stopping, searching young boys like me in East Croydon, and if that would have stopped that person from losing their lives, then they were all for it. The situation is very nuanced when it comes to police. The answer is better community engagement. The answer is police officers being told to be respectful, polite when they're doing things that might make us uncomfortable. But the answer is definitely not to judge a police officer for doing something that you and I may well do if we were in their position too. And so a lot more nuance than people allow for it. And, it's strange because when I was first presented with data that was not in the public domain, when after Theresa May had launched the race disparity audit, and then I went into number 10 as a senior special advisor, the figures were very striking and challenging for me. But then the more I engaged with police officers, the more I understood that there is a human element to it. And the human element that we always focus on is our experience, but not their experience. These are human beings. They have families and they put themselves in harm's way every single day. And if any one of us, from whatever background, has a challenge, the first point of call are also these people. So we need them to succeed. Nigel Farage reforms, rhetoric in the last week or two, totally unhelpful. But I don't think many people have gotten this right in public discourse, in my opinion.
Okay, Emma.
I mean, I don't know whether it's that I'm not in politics that my answers are shorter and maybe sweeter, I don't know. But is there? Certainly police are human and therefore flawed. It certainly seems like there is two-tier policing in plenty of situations that I watch. I'm not there. I'm no expert. I remember the Southport riots in 2024, and there was unrelenting arrests and clampdowns, which made complete sense because there was crashing and burning everywhere. But then a few weeks later in Hare Hill, I think it was in Leeds, there was a Roma child that was they were trying to take into social services, and there was the same slashing and burning all over the streets, and absolutely nothing happened at all. So it doesn't seem like the same situations are treated fairly. From my perspective, I don't sit and look at statistics, and I don't have the answer, but it looks that way.
Siobhan.
I see two-tier policing all the time. Good policing and bad policing. As an MP, I see the police do some extraordinary, generous, kind, innovative work, and on occasions you see them being absolutely dreadful. So I see both. I don't believe that when it comes to serious action that there is a view that you can do this to somebody who's white and that to somebody who's black. I think the first duty of police officer is to make a situation safe and to look after their own safety as well, which I think is probably a major driver. So I think it's always great to try and improve and increase standards, but we have to do it properly because it's a tough old job, and I want them to keep on doing it.
And isn't the lesson from the last few days is that we've all made our own individual judgments over what happened by having watched that section of that video, which apparently is a lot longer. So we all jump to conclusions, maybe the right conclusions, who knows? But until we actually have the report from the IOPC, which looks at all angles, we actually shouldn't be judging this, should we? Anyway, let's move on to Oscar in Manchester, who says, while we're talking about what Nigel did or didn't mean, we're not talking about that 5 million quid he didn't declare, or the millions more the same donor has now given to Reform UK. Isn't it time to change how our political parties are funded and stop letting big money donors buy the ears of our leaders? Well, the accounts for each of the parties for the first 3 months of this year have been released. The cryptocurrency billionaire who gave Nigel Farage that controversial £5 million, Christopher Harborne, has donated a further £3 million to Reform this year, while another cryptocurrency tycoon called Ben Dello has given the party £4 million in all. Reform made around £9 million from private donations from January to March, while Labour and the Conservatives were both given around £4 million each. I think the Lib Dems were on 2.9 million, if I remember, and the Greens 260,000. I don't know what we should make of that. Siobhan.
Well, we've got the representation of the People's Act in Parliament at the moment, looking at how much people can give, particularly from outside the UK. So we're looking at ways to try and restrict this. I think it's great that people do want to make donations to political parties, because if they don't, there's only one other place that's coming from, and that's the taxpayer, and none of us want to see that. So
you say that, but there are plenty of MPs who would support that.
I personally wouldn't. I think that political parties are there to make their case and prove their point, and to encourage people who want to support them to donate to them within a I don't want a free-for-all in it like there is in America.
But the problem is, I mean, if I go around the panel and say, what do you think the limit should be for any one person or company to donate to a political party, you'll all come up with a different figure.
Yeah, but we will come to a consensus on that. And the Electoral Commission actually do a really good job of regulating donations and the way that we as political parties and individual MPs have to register what we get and how we get it.
Well, what would your limit be?
Oh.
And would it apply to trade unions?
I don't know what my limit would be. But I think it should be fair across the board.
Yeah, but that's a cop-out.
Yeah.
Let's make it fair. Let's all have a group hug.
And based on
that would be really nice, Iain.
Come on then. Samuel.
And so politics was changed in the United Kingdom.
Well, there you go. One day. Yeah, crypto in the Western context, I think, is like, Warren Buffett called it like a glorified pyramid, right? In emerging markets,
I'd like to call it roulette.
It makes sense because it helps to move money around, which is obviously a big issue in many emerging countries, but not in the UK. So personally, I think a lot of this money is flown into politics because they want to avoid it being heavily regulated, right? Then there's no such thing as free money. Trade unions fund Labour not because they like Labour, but because they want Labour to represent their voice, right? And so the challenge, therefore, is if your money's not going to come from people who have vested interests, who funds it? And then if you're going to fund it from the state, how do you decide who gets what portion? Is it based on who won the last election, or the amount of seats you get? How do you calculate something that works? Well, it's a flawed system, I agree, but what's the solution?
But I think if it's open and transparent, and we know where the money is coming from, that's important. It's also important if that money is coming from outside the UK, for forces outside the UK, to try and influence our politics, whether it's Russia, China, or maybe some people in America.
On that controversial note, we'll hear what our other two panellists have to say after the news headlines at 8:31 with Daryl Jackson.
Sir Keir Starmer says a country must choose unity and progress over division and hatred. The Prime Minister says he was humbled to meet the parents of murdered teenager Henry Novak in Downing Street earlier. A member of safety staff's in a serious condition in hospital after being shot with a crossbow at the University of Surrey in Guildford. A former student there, a 21-year-old Saudi national, has been arrested. And the Health Secretary has confirmed that the NHS will issue new rules banning staff from wearing political badges. It follows the government accepting all of the recommendations of an independent review into anti-Semitism within the health service. LBC weather: showers this evening, becoming more focused across northern and western areas. Breezy in the north, lows of 7 degrees.
This is LBC.
Entrepreneurs. Emma.
I almost fell off my seat when someone mentioned state-funded election campaigning and wasn't sure what side of the world that we were on. But ultimately, there are caps on what individuals are allowed to donate. And you want wealthy individuals, or in fact individuals in general, to be able to donate, because that helps lift minority voices, new voices. £9 million is not even that much.
There aren't caps on what people can donate. There are caps on what parties can spend.
Yes, sorry, forgive on what they can spend. Precisely.
And what you have to register.
But you have to register, right? You have to register and declare. I don't understand why we would want to stop that. I understand that people say, well, wealthy people and money can influence politics, but I mean that ultimately, how else do you pay for political campaigning? And it is declared and open. I don't. I always think if there's a better alternative, I'll pick that. But I don't know of a better alternative at the moment, so I don't have any suggestion, and strongly support people giving their money in an election period, because you do want to have your voice heard.
Sebastian.
It feels a bit like the debate on voting systems, doesn't it? Where every option put before you is in some way imperfect. And we have to remember that big donors are rarely philanthropists. They are thinking of this as an investment. They want something out of it. And that certainly seems to be the case with Christopher Harborne, the crypto donor, and Reform, lo and behold, has brought forward policies to cut taxes on crypto. But what I would like to see is a move towards lower sum donations, people giving £5-10, what they can. It feels fairer. It feels like you have more of a stake in your party.
Well, there's no barrier for them to do that.
Not at all. Not at all.
It's easy now.
But it's about building the culture. What's happened, though, unfortunately, is the SNP in Scotland. You've had Peter Murrell sullying this process, raiding the coffers of the SNP, and that was a lot of small donations. And I can really understand people who would look at that and say, well, I don't want to give donations to parties because look where it ends up.
But on a constituency level, that's very different, isn't it? I mean, most of the money we raise in Mitcham and Morden are from people who give us small amounts of money.
Yeah.
But do you have, on your constituency website, do you have a donate button?
Probably no, we don't.
Maybe
you see, that's the problem. In that, even when I remember first discussing this about 15 years ago, when it first became possible to pay for something online. And the number of, I mean, you can go onto national party websites and do it, but if you want to donate to your local political party, whichever it is, I would guess that there's probably about under 10% of them have a donate button. You're going to ring up your agent now and get that done.
Yeah, Hannah's getting a call tomorrow morning.
Right, shall we move on to another question? This is from Andrew in Maidenhead. The Economist magazine recently highlighted a new trend of young me-first leftism that it dubs Gen Z socialism. You with me? The magazine calls out its core principles as dangerous, that everything can be paid for by the rich few. The evidence is clear that wealth taxes don't work. Yet, with all the main Labour contenders to be the next Prime Minister calling for wealth taxes of different kinds, are we doomed to relearn lessons the hard way? And in a sense, I suppose that was reflected by Pat McFadden's comment, wasn't it? Where he said to Peter Mandelson in one of these released texts, I just have constant meetings with Labour MPs who want to impose more taxes so we can put up benefits. Sebastian, do you recognise that?
I do recognise that, more from the Greens, if I'm going to deflect a bit of blame here.
They're not in charge, mate.
Well, this is it. And what I'm really allergic to are these general vibesy policies that have no basis in reality. And that's why I'm a bit hesitant about a wealth tax. In theory, I would love it, because I do believe, as someone on the left, that if you are wealthier, you should bear more of the brunt of the tax burden.
Which you already do.
Well, which they are already doing. But this is, these are extreme times. We need to find money from somewhere, and it seems sensible to go after those who have the most to give. But a blanket wealth tax, as the person asking this question has mentioned, doesn't seem to work. What we've seen with Labour is a more piecemeal approach. So whether you're going for private schools or private jets or whatever else, seems to be a more sensible way of going about it.
Emma?
My grandpa worked in a hat factory, and he always told my dad that under Labour, the ordinary person would never do would never do as well as they think they would. And my dad passed that on to me, that this strong desire to treat wealth creation and people who created wealth and have wealth accumulated as people you should go after, it's abomination to me. Yes, wealth tax does not work, and it's not a good idea. And wealthy people are leaving the country. And
but don't you agree that we're all part of a project?
I can't wait for Labour to be gone, so it's removed.
We're all part of this country. We all have a role to play, and if you are slightly richer, you should pay slightly more.
They do.
Literally.
Sure, but...
Yeah, but you asked a question and the answer is yes. Everyone agrees with you. So what is your point there?
Yet we have not balanced the books. Yet we are in an economic crisis.
Labour can't balance the books. They've got a bunch of people there who have never... You've got a business minister who's never run a business.
So let me turn this around. If you're not going to go after wealthier people, where are you going to find the money?
Stop using... I think if you use the word go after, I think it's probably why a lot of people find Labour quite shocking. So you have got to have wealth creation in order to pay for all that long list of things that Labour would like to pay for increasingly. And I don't know a single person that works hard that doesn't want the country to be successful and doesn't want everybody else to be successful and have good public services and a good NHS. But there comes a point where things are completely out of balance, such as with the Labour Party today, who talk about growth but are constantly focused on taxing everybody and are reducing unemployment, reducing growth, reducing the ability for business to hire people. The list is so long. So, going after people, which is what Labour is doing at the moment, is not the right approach. And lots of people who can are leaving as a result.
So to return to the question, where do we find that money?
Stop spending it so recklessly.
Literally.
And stop preventing businesses from growing, hiring
Where's
and
the
making
reckless
money.
spending?
Literally. Oh. Well said. Well said. Am I allowed to clap? I won't clap.
I can hear myself getting het up. It drives me up the pole. It really does. Do you know what I was about to say? Does anybody know where I stand on this? Because if not, I'd be happy to share it.
Because you're about to say, and another thing.
I'm about to headbutt something. No, but listen, I think it's a frustration of everybody I know. Today, I sat with my HR person talking about the change to the workers' rights bill, the employment bill, discussing, because we're a multinational company. We have some people here, we have people in the US, in Brazil, the Philippines, all over the place. And we have been sitting. In fact, my HR director is calling me now because I called her before I came on and said, I wanted to have a quick word with you about some of the things we're having to do.
Come on, we can listen into the conversation.
Alison should call in because we've had to make some really hard decisions.
She's obviously not listening, is she?
Well, she's taken an hour to come back to me, unfortunately. So it's a little bit late, but we were discussing today about hiring people in the UK.
Alison,
and it's not going to happen.
I'd be looking for another job if I were. Samuel.
Yeah, look, Labour came in as a government who clearly does not understand how to create wealth and grow an economy. Completely ignorant decisions have been made. For example, we have 1 million young people unemployed, but then you raise the minimum wage for a young person who doesn't have a huge amount of experience during a very tough economic time for businesses. What do you think an average employer is going to do? They're not going to take on a young person. And so that feeds into a vicious cycle. 45p on the pound, is already top rate of tax, is not nice for somebody who can choose to live in, go back to Dubai. They may have left for a while. Choose to live in the Middle East, choose to live in the United States, even some states where taxes are significantly lower. Why would they stay here? What we've done is we've disincentivized people trying hard to self-actualize.
And ordinary people. My receptionist, Gemma, is someone I use as a kind of barometer for everything. And she came here with her parents from Cyprus. Her kids are first generation at university, and her middle son has just left to go to Dubai because he can't buy a home, he can't get a proper job, his taxes are too high. So, let's...
But he cannot buy a house, not because of his taxes, but because of the price of property, which has risen exponentially. And what we might be forgetting in this conversation is we're currently borrowing at 100% of GDP. That is what we inherited. So in order to be able not to expand public services on anything we might want to do, but just to stand still, we have to keep on borrowing. And the thing that I really have a problem with is when people are talking about taxes and assuming that there is a tiny group of people who are going to pay this. Most of the people who are going to pay most are in the middle because there's more of them, so you can generate more from them. But this is a historic thing, not a new thing. And I would say that the government has done some great things on growth, on changing planning regulations, making it much more easy for us to get a third runway at Heathrow or a second runway at Gatwick, or to spend more to invest in our public services, to build more houses. And those are things that we need to do in order to expand our economy. But the idea that you can suddenly remove 14 years of Conservative government and the context that we now find ourselves in is for the birds. And, you don't get wealthy anymore by going to work and getting a wage. You get wealthy by having a lot of assets. So we really do have to look at where is the balance between income tax from going to work and the amount of money you make from having assets for being basically wealthy and being able to buy a lot of stuff.
Well,
and that's
most people
why
have got wealthy, not necessarily because they have assets. They've accumulated assets because they've taken risks. They've started companies which have been incredibly successful. So therefore, why shouldn't they benefit from
I think anybody
taking
who
that
makes
risk?
a successful company should look.
But
Ian,
people are not incentivised to do that anymore.
I am a Blairite. I have no problem with people.
Colour me surprised.
I have no problem with people becoming wealthy and doing well. I want people to be aspirant. I want people to work hard and do more. Our problem is the economic hole that has been dug for us over a period of time.
Oh dear. I mean, really, the last couple of years have been tragic. And respectfully, have you spoken to house builders recently, or have you spoken to small or medium-sized businesses? Because I don't think their views reflect yours. And clearly, people can have different views. But, if I think I could list out 20 things that have happened in the last 12 months that make me hire less in the UK, do less business in the UK, make less money in my business in the UK, and a long list of things that are no good for anybody, not just me, people that might want to come work for me, people that might want to work for me in the future, kids I'd like to employ, older people I'd like to employ, investment I'd like to make in the UK. So, with the greatest of respect, I totally understand inheriting something, because that is, could do nothing about that. But decisions made over the last couple of years, as far as I'm concerned, it is binary that they were not in favour of growth. And it's laughable.
The idea that somehow the UK is unusual or different in that respect. We actually have some of the best growth figures in the G7. So we're not doing badly on all fronts, but we are in a challenging position of how much we have borrowed and have to repay.
Right. Well, that was a good discussion. I enjoyed that.
Finally, there was some disagreement.
And exactly. And I didn't have to intervene too much, which I like. Well, Corey and Chris always like it when I don't say a word. Right. We'll take another few questions in just a moment. It's 8:46.
LBC.
Mayor just against democracy. Well, we're going to be discussing this after 9 o'clock this evening. Now, during last night's LBC State of London debate, the London Mayor, Sir Sadiq Khan, condemned what he called NIMBY councillors who oppose things like the pedestrianisation of Oxford Street in London's West End, or extending the licensing hours of pubs, bars and restaurants in the same part of the capital. Sir Sadiq said that if you choose to live in the middle of a big city, then you have to expect that there will be lots of people and noise. So he wants to have powers where he, as the mayor, can make these decisions on individual areas within London and take it away from local councillors. Yet if he was here and I said to Sadiq Khan, do you believe in localism? He would undoubtedly say, oh, yes, I do. But he's actually taking decisions up a notch. Now, he may be right to do that. Siobhan.
Well, I think this relates to the Soho Society, who are opposing the extension of licensing hours in Soho, which strikes me as mad. I mean, it is central London. It is a place for going out, socialising. And I imagine that if you buy a place in Soho, you know that's what you're getting. I mean, I once had a constituent complain to me. They went and moved next door to a church, and they complained that they played the bells on a Sunday morning. So
Did you know I'm a campanologist?
Are you?
I am. Was. Playing Bob Minor.
Ooh.
I used to do the number 8 bell, the heavy one.
Oh.
Ah.
Well, I mean,
her neighbour wouldn't have liked you.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, so I mean, I think we're back to the, planning reform, understanding where, what you're buying into in the neighbourhood. If you want to live in Soho, you're going to get...
Well, it's like people who complain about living next to airports when the airport was there before they moved there. By the way...
Or a school. I once had somebody complain to me that children were noisy in the school playground.
I got some sympathy with that.
Oh, curmudgeon.
I am known as Uncle Herod by my nieces. I should say that we've invited the Soho Society on the show this evening, and LBC has contacted them repeatedly over the last few days. Still yet to hear anything from them, so if anyone from the Soho Society is listening and would like to take part in our discussion after 9, 0345 6060 973. Samuel.
Yeah, you're not the only former councillor on the panel. I was district councillor for 6 years. And the things that used to irk me the most was when residents would come and moan about things that were completely rational to happen. So, for example, of course, there is a bit of noise when kids come into school in the morning and in the afternoon. Of course, we need to build more homes. And just because you own your own doesn't mean a young person shouldn't be allowed to. And of course, if you're in Soho, you should expect reasonably to hear quite a lot of noise because it should be a place that is vibrant, that is bringing in a lot of money into central London, that is attracting people from across the world. And so localism isn't always the answer, I have to say. And Sadiq Khan, even though I'm not a huge fan of his, is absolutely right on this.
Sebastian?
Completely agree. It's central London. I was very sad to describe London the other day as the city that sleeps, because you try getting into a nightclub after 1 or 2 o'clock, it's impossible. And this is only going to make it harder. And I'm going to say the awkward thing. The Soho Society, they're largely people who are a little bit older, a little bit seasoned by time, and they want to have their early night. And not a great place to live, Soho, is it, if you want to get to bed by 9 o'clock? We've got to let it thrive, both for the economy and for the well-being of those of us who want to go out and party.
I'll ignore the ageist comments there.
I have no district council credentials and I've not tried to get into a nightclub after 1 a.m. But 2 things. One, please nobody give Sadiq Khan any more power. And second of all, there are 3, I learned this yesterday from a man called Sam Harrison, who's just closed his restaurant that he's had for 20 years in Chiswick. There are 3 hospitality businesses closing a day in the United Kingdom. VAT is 20%, unlike 10% everywhere else in the rest of the world. I work in central, on days, I spend half my time in the US, half my time in the UK. My office is in central London. It is an absolute ghost town. On Fridays, I don't know how any of the sandwich shops and salad bars make any money whatsoever. And so anything that further detracts people from going out and about in London, as far as I'm concerned, is a terrible idea.
So you agree with Sadiq Khan?
It's difficult to say, but yes. He's a nice man, but yes.
She said it in the end. Right, Madeline in Bristol says almost half of university students want to bring back the death penalty. How did Britain's youth become so authoritarian? Can we blame it all on Elon Musk, like Keir Starmer seems to? Well, a survey of just over 1,000 undergraduates aged between 18 and 21 carried out by the Higher Education Policy Institute think tank has found that 47% were in favour of reintroducing capital punishment, while 46% were against it under any circumstances. Well, I'm quite surprised by that. Emma?
I mean, that's 1,000 people. Did they go to one particular town or city where there was...
Well, no, let's just assume it is a fair representation.
I don't know. I was just thinking about my kids, of which I have quite a lot, and what would they say? I feel pretty sure that none of them would be in favour of the death penalty, and they've all had quite different educations, and I've got 2 adopted children from the other side of the world, so I don't know, that surprises me somewhat. That feels quite hard line for all the younger people I know in that age group who... I don't know, to have tendencies like that.
Maybe, I don't know.
And you're not in favour of the death penalty?
I don't think I've ever given it serious thought, but instinctively, no.
Sebastian?
The only thing I think that's positive we can take from this is that it is in line with, I think, the rest of the population, which means that young people are just as batty on this issue as the general public are. We cannot go around killing people on behalf of the state. I'm very pleased that's not something we have in this country anymore. If you find that there's been a miscarriage of justice, you cannot bring them back. Long may we be a civilised nation and not learn from our neighbours across the pond.
Because, I mean, Siobhan, when you and I were growing up, this was a really heated topic of debate in the country, wasn't it? I mean, there were votes in Parliament on it as late as, I think, the mid-1980s. So, but it's gone away as an issue now. Well, I think it has.
That poll, astounds me as it seems to astound everybody else. I mean, unless they're seeing it in a very, black and white sort of way, but that I find it hard to believe that young people would be kind of that illiberal. I mean, one of the last people to be hung in this country was Derek Bentley, who his niece is a constituent, and I've seen firsthand just how, it didn't just kill Derek Bentley. The rest of the family were just destroyed by it as well. So I find it hard to believe people want to bring it back.
Samuel?
Yeah, I'm sure no one wants people to be hung. It's strangely enough, I was thinking about this week. I have no idea why. Very random. In fact, I do know why. We've had a number of murder cases where the sentences that were handed down I found quite interesting. So one, I think, was 28 years, another was 31 years to life, meaning 28 or 38 years they will be out, and they might even get to have a good 10, 20, 30 years of their life in freedom. And I was... Well,
Vikram Digwa, the man who killed Henry Novak, he's got 21 years.
Yeah, and so for me, I just paused and thought, how do I feel about that? And then the other side of that is, well, if they had longer sentences, then we would all be paying for them to continue to live for an extended period of time. So then what then is the solution? Probably not capital punishment could be an option, but then what if you get it wrong? And so how do you... this is what I was unpacking on the train into London. And then I was like, okay, friend, then who would you feel comfortable, being essentially killed as a result of a sentence? Well, paedophiles, maybe people would always say, or somebody that had committed heinous crimes, multiple murders. But then with the rise of AI... can you really know in 10 or 20 years' time, beyond all reasonable doubt, that somebody is accused of a crime and found guilty of a crime, definitely committed that crime? So this was my thinking on the way.
I listened to 80s music on the way to work. Your journey to work is infinitesimally more erudite and intellectual than mine is.
This is what I was doing.
Wow.
Wham. Duran.
This morning it was Bananarama, actually.
Excellent. Right, our fun question from Catherine in East Grinstead. The exams regulator's boss has warned it's becoming harder to catch school pupils cheating because so many of them are now using gadgets like earpieces and pens with little screens on them. Be honest, you must have cheated at school at some point. How did you do it? Sebastian.
I was such a goody-goody. I don't think I've ever cheated, but I've played the game very tactically. I studied music at my first year of undergraduate, and we had the Bach World Tempo Clavier, book one. There are 24 preludes and fugues in there, and you can get asked on any one of them. And I'm a crammer. I'm an essay crisis kind of boy. And I started from the back. What comes up? Number 24. We're absolutely fine.
Emma?
It's been quite a long time since I took exams, so I've been sitting here racking my brains. I don't know that it's harder now. I don't think it is, because there are requirements, very strict rules about what you can take into exams. You can't take a drink, you can't take a tissue, you've got to have a clear pencil case. I don't remember doing any material cheating, but I will come clean because my husband's listening and knows sometimes at cards, if he's not looking, that I probably, if I could have got away with it, I must have scribbled some stuff on the inside of a wrist or something like that. I don't know if it's harder. I mean, school kids can't go with clever AI earpieces. A teacher would see that. Doesn't sound true to me.
Siobhan?
Hey, you didn't get away with anything with Sister Elizabeth. She walked up and down those aisles with precision stamping. Nothing was going on there, I'll tell you.
What a good group of
people. Is that your
are.
answer?
Yeah.
So you're not going to admit to any childhood misdemeanours?
No.
And if she did, the church is going to be heavy-handed, so best not press her any
Samuel?
The odd thunderbolt might happen.
Thunderbolt. I mean, I was a bit of a naughty kid. I was in and out of schools, so there was not much time for me to take exams and cheat, to be honest. But it doesn't mean I was good by any stretch of imagination. When I was in year 9, I went to 3 schools within 2.5 terms. When I was in nursery, I was expelled, as you do. So there was not much time for me to sit down and think about.
There were no cheats on the
cheating.
panel. Ian, did you cheat?
Yes.
Go on.
I'm going to admit it. In the end of my third year exam, so the ones when you then have to choose your GCSE options, I did cheat at my physics end of year exam, and I just wrote things on the inside of my hand, and I got 75% in the marks, and then I was forced to choose physics to do an O-level in and got ungraded at it. So your sins will always find you out.
Well, the story
all came out in the wash.
Yeah, I'm not proud of it. Anyway, thank you all very much indeed. Really good panel tonight. On Monday, we have Labour MP Toby Perkins, Independent peer and former MEP Baroness Claire Fawkes, and the economist and former Labour advisor Duncan Weldon. Now, coming up in the next hour, we're going to return to the subject of nightlife in big cities, particularly London. Sir Sadiq Khan has hit out at what he calls NIMBY councillors who are blocking the nighttime economy. If you live in the middle of a city, unless your family has lived there for like 100 years or something, you will be used to a lot of noise. But if you move into a city and you think you're going to just have a quiet life, well, I mean, that's just not going to happen, and you must surely be intelligent enough to realise that. So these councillors who are trying to block the plans to revive the central London nighttime economy, they're just doing it for votes, aren't they? 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock. Sir Keir Starmer's promised to fight for right the wrongs in Henry Novak's murder as he met the student's family in Downing Street. He says the 18-year-old deserves a legacy that goes beyond the awful tragedy. Police in Southampton handcuffed the teenager when his killer falsely accused him of racism. Earlier, the Prime Minister claimed Elon Musk is trying to whip up division in the UK. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch wants cross-party work towards solutions.
The only people who should gain now are young people across our country whose safety we're all concerned about, trust in the police being improved and the family getting closure and a meaningful outcome after the loss of Henry's life.
Volodymyr Zelensky's proposed a face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin in an open letter taunting Russia over the war. Ukraine's leader cited drone strikes, inflation and petrol shortages as evidence of more and more negative consequences for Moscow. He also claimed Russian military losses had become unsustainable. Putin's again rejected Kyiv's demand for a ceasefire before any talks. A man in his 50s is in hospital after being shot with a crossbow at the University of Surrey. LBC's Emily Potter has the details.
A member of staff was seriously injured when this happened on campus in Guildford at around 10 this morning. Police say a 21-year-old man who's a Saudi national and a former student at the university has been arrested. He's being questioned on suspicion of attempted murder.
The government's independent advisor on anti-Semitism has told LBC it's far more widespread in the NHS than people realise.
For example, the man who hasn't gone public, he turns up at work as the only Jewish person in his part of the NHS, and bacon fat is smeared across his locker. That's devastating. You don't know exactly who's done it, but you know it's one of your immediate work colleagues.
Lord Mann says health service staff should be banned from wearing political badges at work. It's part of a wider set of recommendations to prevent anti-Jewish hate in the health service. They've all been accepted by the Health Secretary. And Sainsbury's is switching the colour of its own brand eggs. It says hens laying white-shelled eggs eat less and live longer, which lowers their carbon footprint. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed up 28 points at 10,360. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather showers this evening, becoming more focused across northern and western areas tonight. Breezy in the north, lows of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
9:04 on LBC. I think one of the problems that many big cities are experiencing at the moment is the decline of the nighttime economy, particularly at weekends. There are all sorts of different reasons for this. And I think if you run a hospitality, if you're in the hospitality sector, if you run a pub, if you run a restaurant, if you run a nightclub, and let's face it, particularly in London, I mean, nightclubs are almost dying out nowadays. I think you've seen this effect. Is it something that's really happened just after COVID, where we all got used to staying at home? I think that's a simplistic answer, if I'm honest. I think there are all sorts of societal issues here. Cost of living crisis contributes to it as well, because let's face it, if you're in central London and you want to go on a night out, you're with friends. If you go to a pub or a bar and then go on to a nightclub, I mean, you're going to be spending well into three figures, aren't you? Mostly. I mean, I'm sure it's possible to have a cheaper night out in London than that. But I mean, if you go to the theatre nowadays as well, and the tickets cost an extortionate amount now compared to what they were 10 or 20 years ago. I wanted to go and see the Book of Mormon recently because I'd heard great things about it. And it was going to be close on £300 for a decent ticket. Then I thought, OK, well, I'll go and see Hamilton. Similar. OK, there were cheaper tickets, but I didn't want to sit in the gods at the back. So I didn't go. Simple as that. And I think a lot of people are being put off by the rising cost of going out for an evening. I went out for an evening, it was a friend's birthday last year. I went to a pub restaurant just on the outskirts of Tunbridge Wells. It was a perfectly nice place, but I wouldn't say it was anything outstanding. The bill for 5 of us came to £560. And I think only 2 people were drinking. And you think, well, that I'm sorry, is extortionate for an evening out for 5 people just going out for something to eat. And so that is part of the reason why I think the nighttime economy in many cities around the country is struggling. And it's not just in this country. I've read up on this a little bit, and it's happening in cities all over the world. People have got used to staying in a way that they didn't do in the 1980s, 1990s. Is Netflix partly responsible for this? Is social media partly responsible for this? I don't know. So, I mean, I'd quite like your insight into that and look at your own habits as to maybe why you don't go out on the Raz like you used to. Sorry, that's a very 1980s phrase, isn't it? Well, Sadiq Khan has been addressing this during LBC's State of London debate last night when he was asked about balancing the needs of business, especially in the hospitality industry, with residents who live near their premises in big cities.
We're a global city which is flourishing and thriving, and where the average age is 34. And, in certain parts of our city, people want to have fun stuff to do in the evenings and late into the night. I also think that actually having ward councillors who win or lose an election by 12 votes or 24 votes, determining which businesses can stay open until what time, is not good for our city. And I think there are some strategic sites, some parts of London, where we should take it out of the control of ward councillors. One of the reasons why Oxford Street for 30 years has had decline is because you've got NIMBY councillors on either side of that street saying no to any progress. And that's why I asked the government to allow me to take up Oxford Street and pedestrianise it, because the NIMBY council refused to make progress on that street. And the same goes for the nighttime economy. I'm incredibly frustrated. I've got 5 tubes open at the nighttime. I've got record numbers of night buses. They've got nowhere to go to because you can't go to a decent club or a decent bar after a certain time of the day. And I also think, I say in a respectful way, look, if you've chosen to live next to a pub doing live music, if you've chosen to live in the centre of the greatest city in the world, if you've chosen to live next to a nightclub,
He's right, isn't he? I don't agree with Sadiq Khan on an awful lot of things. But on this, I do agree with him. And of course, you have to balance the needs of a city economy with the needs of people who live in cities. I do completely get that. But you can't complain if you decide to rent a flat or buy a house in the middle of Soho, and then you get woken up by noise at midnight or something on a Friday night. That's just utterly ridiculous. Now, I would be very annoyed if I woke up at midnight to a huge amount of noise in the village that I live in, just outside Tunbridge Wells. But that's because I bought a place there that I wasn't expecting for that to happen. But you have to expect that to happen. It's like I said in Cross Question. You move to a house that is underneath the flight path to Heathrow, and then you complain about aircraft noise. I mean, give me a break. But that's the trouble nowadays. People are, I think, increasingly incredibly selfish about these things. And I won't say us because I don't live in London anymore, but I did live in London for about 10 years, from mid-80s to mid-90s. And I chose to live in Docklands because it was a bit outside the city. But I used to love going into the centre of London on a Friday or Saturday night, and you want it to be lively. The worst thing any capital city can have is basically no noise on a Friday or Saturday night, because it shows that it's a dying city. Now, I don't think London is a dying city. I think London is still very vibrant. But what do you think should happen here? Do you think that Sadiq Khan should take over powers and force these things through? Or do you think, no, it is up to the local council? And if you believe in localism, if you believe that decisions should be taken at the lowest level possibly in the political chain, then if you take away powers from local councils, what's the point of being a local councillor if you don't have some sort of influence or control over licensing nightclubs or bars or pubs? 0345 6060 973. Well, Nick Simonite is chair of Unite Sheffield, a trade group which represents the city's nighttime industries, who's also the manager of a 300-year-old pub in the city, the Frog and Parrot. I'd love to know why that pub was called the Frog and Parrot. Nick, let me put that to you as your first difficult question. Why was it called the Frog and Parrot?
Because there was a resident frog and parrot, and it picked up the name back in the 80s. It used to be called the Prince of Wales way back when. But yes, believe it or not.
Right. Tell me about the nighttime economy of Sheffield and how it's evolved over the years.
It's fairly booming, to be fair, right now, particularly at weekends. But that is only because we attract a significant number of students into the city and a lot of people from the wider region. We have probably 1 million people on our doorstep if we go beyond the bounds of Sheffield. And in terms of the residents in the city centre, I think at best we've probably got about 12 to 15,000 when all the students are at home. And they won't support the number of coffee bars, restaurants, shops, cafes, bars, pubs and clubs. It's got to be supported by people from the wider region.
And how often do you get complaints from local residents about noise issues, which is what Sadiq Khan was talking about?
Well, my family own a bar that is in the heart of the Irish Quarter, built exclusively by Roman Catholic, Irish and Italian immigrants about 100 years ago. And neighbours complaining about Irish folk music on St. Patrick's Day is a bit rum. But that happens. It does happen. People like to be in the city centre for its vibrancy, its transport links, the shops, the cafes, the bars. But on occasion, we'll complain about the noise from the nightclub next door that they've moved next to. It's ridiculous on occasion.
And how do you, as chair of Unite, how do you interact with local politicians? I mean, is it Sheffield City Council that make all of the decisions on licensing, or does the? I mean, you have a mayor there, don't you, as well?
We do have a mayor. He's getting his act together. It tends to be Sheffield City Council. We really get on with the local ward councillors. They happen to be all members of the Green Party, and yes, they represent the handful of voters that hold sway in the city centre. But they recognise, I think, the value of the nighttime economy. The retail side has taken a bit of a hit more recently, certainly post-COVID. As have a number of bars. We've seen bar closures, nightclubs going by the way. Some significant ones over the last handful of years.
And what do you put that down to?
People working from home. It's easy to get your deliveries at home during working hours. We need people moving about. We need people back in city centres. That would be helpful. Yes, there's a cost of living crisis, but the average price of a pint has matched half an hour's wage, minimum wage, since it was introduced in 1999. It just feels expensive now. There's so much more to do, but we have some good operators in Sheffield. Best Bar None is a great scheme that looks at your policies and practice and encourages great customer care, staff training, and we have a significant number of outlets in and around town that fly that flag, and it's a good thing for the city. It's a good thing for visitors. Visitors come into the city for all sorts of reasons. They might be on a first date, because at some point, once you've met your Bumble or Hinge date, you've got to take a step into the real world, and it's great to do that in a supervised, regulated environment. But more, the thing in Sheffield is the music, and we really have a heartbeat in the city that's produced some significant bands, not just from Sheffield, but from the wider region. And those young bands, the likes of the Sherlocks from Bolton-on-Doon, they'll play the clubs out there, the working men's clubs, but at some point they've got to move into Rotherham, Doncaster and Sheffield. Youngblood from Doncaster, once he'd made the leap from Emmerdale, he found his tribe certainly in Sheffield. The Park Hill Romance song, I Love You, Will You Marry Me? Significant hit for our fair city, and we kind of claim that wider region and its kids and grown-up adults my age that flock in on the trains and the buses, certainly at the weekend, and we need them.
See, one of my producers, Corey, he comes from Rotherham, so he's off today. He's raving it up in Barcelona, can you believe? The most unlikely person to go to a rave that I can think of. So he could have really informed this debate. But I've never been to Sheffield, and you've made me want to visit.
We have a good show. There's a lot of independent little shops out there. I think more so than most other towns. Sheffield's great at making do and getting on with it. Rotherham, love the place, love the Raytons. Their front man Johnny Yerrill made his name spitting bars as a poet in the Frog and Parrot many years ago, and they're doing worldwide tours now. We really do export music from this region and do it really well. It's not just about the Arctic Monkeys. We've got bands coming through that will make waves. I'm sure Sheffield's a great night out.
Well, and here endeth the advertisement for the Sheffield Tourist Board. Nick, thank you very much indeed. Really interesting conversation. That's Nick Simonite there, chair of Unite Sheffield, a trade group which represents the city's nighttime industries. Well, is Nick's experience in Sheffield, is that replicated in other cities around the country? Do you worry that elected mayors are now trying to, Sadiq Khan is a typical example, is trying to pull powers away from local councils? And what about this constant dilemma about noise in city centres? Is it one of those issues where you think people just need to grow up? If you don't want noise, don't live in a city centre. Is it as simple as that? 0345 6060 973. It's 18 minutes past 9 on LBC.
LBC.
during the rest of the year. But Edinburgh has a fairly vibrant nighttime economy. Manchester certainly does. Birmingham, I would think, from my experience there, less so, but maybe I'm being unfair. So I'd be interested in your views on that. But let's concentrate on this conflict between local residents and the nighttime industries, because there's always going to be a conflict there, isn't there? 0345 6060 973. Stephen's in Canada Water. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, Ian. Good evening. I'd like to talk about Soho. I was a member of the Soho Society, even though I don't live there. I was a member for a few years, and the reason I left was because of their licensing policy. I thought it was crucifying, especially the smaller businesses. I use a cafe in Soho a few times a week. I go up in the mornings. I'm my age, I'm more of a morning person than a nighttime person nowadays. But they used to have a couple of tables outside. Residents and others complained about it, said it was blocking the pavement. They were removed. They had a couple of benches outside. Same residents complained and they had to be removed. And that takes away business. And it's also useful as a social thing. If you sat outside having a little drink, you chat to people walking past and things, and I just feel so the Soho Society are strangling the smaller businesses in Soho.
It's so short-sighted, isn't it? Because, let's remember, back in the 70s and 80s and way before that, Soho was always seen as a bit of a seedy part of London.
I remember those
it's
days,
completely transformed now. And I think this sort of pavement cafe economy, it's obviously the streets in Soho are not particularly wide, so you can't have that everywhere. But it gives an impression of a vibrant part of London.
Yeah, if you look down Berwick Street now, it just looks like an empty street at night time and things, during the day. But the council do allow all these food stalls down the middle of Berwick Street, with some with questionable hygiene, pouring fat down the drains, etc. Now, what's more important, a decent cafe that they pay all the rates, they pay the staff, business rates, etc., which are now extremely high, and they're struggling, which to me is a big shame.
Well, I look, all cities evolve. Nothing ever stands still, and there are some parts of different cities that specialise in one thing, and then 20 years later they're specialising in another. People of my generation always associated Soho with sex shops. Well, that is not the case anymore, is it?
No, I'm the same generation as you, so I've seen all the changes. They say, even though I don't live there, I live in leafy Canada Water. I say I'm up there 4 days a week, 4 mornings a week, have a couple of drinks, then have lunch, meet people, have good conversation, and especially as summer's coming, it would be lovely to sit outside. Okay, you can, just after COVID, they allowed all the tables and chairs, and I think that probably went a bit too far, because you couldn't walk down, say, Old Compton Street. It was blocked. So there has to be a balance. And I think the balance has gone too far the other way. Maybe with a change in Westminster City Council, that might, help things.
Stephen, thank you very much for your call. Sean in Concert says, guess what? Concert is the best place for a night out, Ian. Well, as you know, Sean, I have my grandfather lived in Concert for a time, but I've never been there. But one day I'm going to come and visit you. Let's go to Darren, who's in Hammersmith. Hello, Darren.
Hello, Ian. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
It's funny enough. I was reminded of my ex-partner when you started playing this night. He used to run nightclubs in Mayfair, like West End. He used to run most nightclubs, and I just remember how vibrant and how buzzing London used to be. And funny enough, as an operations manager, his biggest issue consistently was this constant balancing act with local councillors and licensing officials, and going to license reviews and councillors. And I remember him being a license review. It came down to the fact the council didn't like the type of music that was played in the club, and it was just that. And the thing is, I do appreciate that they should be there to represent local local issues and opinions and gripes and to forward to make sure that the local community feels inclusive. But I think we need to start communicating to people that actually we are losing fantastic small businesses that are self-sustaining, that sustain families, a generation of people within that sort of small business, because London's just not open anymore. And I remember I was with my current partner's family coming down from Manchester, like 2 months ago, and after we had dinner in Chinatown, my father was like, "Oh yeah, let's go to this place in Old Compton Street. I used to go there years ago." And I pulled onto Old Compton Street, and it was just empty. And I was like, "What? What? Old Compton Street on a Saturday night?" And I don't know whether I think we need to get a bit creative. I think we need to do something creative with business rates in terms of incentivising nighttime economies. I don't know if it becomes seasonal, if there's like a seasonal break, you get credit for days, but for the weekends. But we need to sort of tell the community, listen, it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or a Friday, Saturday, because that's when people are able to, and incentivize people to get into town. It's fairly easy to move around, impressively easy, I think, in London at any time of the day, and even fairly late. But there's just nothing open. Right to Liverpool. Liverpool is like probably the best.
Wow. I'm getting texts saying Liverpool is
stunning,
brilliant.
Yeah. And I tell you why it's brilliant. I go there fairly often, and I'm every time I'm very impressed that something's still open so late. And it's quite orderly. It's not actually very noisy. Obviously, if we have sensible rules, i.e. past a certain time, people can't stand outside. There's things you can do to mitigate the impact. But, Liverpool is buzzing. From a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it's a buzzing city, and I'm like, well, we have to be able to engage with the community and the councillors, and I think that he's probably right. I think we need to start taking power away from them and start getting these businesses busy and populated and get. Remember that campaign? Let's do London. Remember that campaign? Let's do London. We need to do more of that and engage with people and let people know that the impact of us closing this city and making it more difficult is going to be on the economy and on small businesses.
Because the thing is, a few years ago, Transport for London, was this under Sadiq Khan or Boris Johnson? I honestly can't remember. They introduced the nighttime train services on selected lines on Friday and Saturday night. So that made it much easier for many people to be able to get home. And when I lived in Walthamstow in the late 1980s, early 1990s, you were always looking at your watch. Because we didn't have smartphones then. Because you thought, well, I'm not going to be able to get home if I don't leave now. And you don't want to leave a nightclub necessarily at 11:30.
So now you've got the infrastructure, now you've got the logistics in place, much more of them. And you just don't have people incentivised. And I think people that aren't from London think it's not a very safe place. I think most people in London feel fairly safe when they move around. Yeah. But I think it's the same issue I have with the government of the day is that I don't think governments communicate with people very well about what they do and what the impact of things are. I think they spend so much time sort of fighting all of the wrong things and actually finding creative ways to communicate with people on social media about the positive things, about the positive consequences to positive things. And I think London needs to do a massive campaign to really, and massive incentivization to make people want to, just branch out. Maybe more day festivals, and explain that we can turn a day festival into a later evening and start to get people out and moving, because I think everyone working from home thing is like, well, people do want to get out, people do want to socialise. If we find a way to make it easier for businesses to maybe cut some of those costs, not all of them, but maybe give them a certain release on certain days to incentivise, a little bit of a reduction, people can feel like the money goes a little bit further, and they also know that they are contributing. They feel like if they eat out to help out, they know they are contributing to that business starting up again. I think get people more involved.
I think thank you very much, Darren. I think one of the big things that we have to recognise is that London is an amalgam of all sorts of different areas. And you look at the South Bank. I remember going to see Fuse ODG at the South Bank Centre. Was at the Royal Festival Hall. This would have been about a year ago. And that was, I think, on a Friday night, or it was either Friday or Saturday. And that area on a Friday or Saturday night is absolutely rammed with people, really buzzing. And I think a friend of mine lives in Chiswick, and you sort of look at the nighttime economy there, and that seems to be fairly vibrant. So in a sense, you can't talk about London as just one amorphous sort of entity. It's a collection of different communities who will have different planning regulations, who will have different incentives for the nighttime economy. So in a way, we need to talk about how we can improve the nighttime economy, not just in different parts of London, but in different cities around the country. We've got half an hour left to discuss this. I really would quite like to understand more about the nighttime economies in all sorts of different areas. Somebody's saying here, Belfast, especially if you like traditional Irish music, and you see, that's something that I think individual cities and communities can really take advantage of. If your local area, like Manchester, I mean, Manchester also, I think, is fairly vibrant, and that is partly based, I think, on a lot of its history, on a lot of its musical history, it has to be said. But where do you think are the sort of real... If you were going to any city in the UK just for 2 or 3 days of enjoying yourself in the nighttime economy, what would be first on your list? It's 9:32 News Headlines with Daryl Jackson.
Sir Keir Starmer's promised to right the wrongs in Henry Novak's murder as he met the student's family in Downing Street. He says the 18-year-old deserves a legacy that goes beyond the awful tragedy. Volodymyr Zelensky has proposed a face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin in an open letter taunting Russia over the war. Ukraine's leader cited drone strikes, inflation and petrol shortages as evidence of more and more negative consequences for Moscow. And Liverpool have confirmed Andoni Iraola has signed a 2-year deal to be their new head coach. He replaces Arne Slot after leading fellow top-flight side Bournemouth to the Europa League. LBC weather, showers this evening becoming more focused across northern and western areas. Breezy in the north, lows of 7 degrees.
Hear every side of the story. This is LBC.
Hi, Iain. If you ever do a subject about men chasing women and it not working, please let me be the first caller on that. But actually, what it is, this thing about noise pollution in central London, I can speak on it because I'm not an NIMBY, but I'm actually in agreement with most of those residents who have an issue with what's going on. Now, the thing is this. I think the noise music complaint is a bit of a red herring. The real issue with living in central London is not the music from the club, although I do appreciate you had one of the club owners saying that he's had some complaints about Irish music being played. The real issue is the noise pollution from the environment. We're talking illegal motorists or inconsiderate motorists blasting their horns after 11 p.m. It's just illegal to do that unless, of course, there's danger, right? But no one in Soho, no one in central London cares about that. They'll simply press their horns for the most silly of things. That's annoying. We've also got the LT buses, you know, those new buses, well, not new now, they were like 10 years old, which Boris introduced. Those LT buses, the horns on those specific buses are the loudest noises known to man on those specific LT buses. And those drivers, again, they'll break the law, blowing a horn 24/7. When you hear those horns, it's like a ship coming into dock. We've also got the noise pollution of those illegal pedicabs.
Oh, don't get me started on them.
Yeah, blaring ABBA's dancing Queen all night long, right? There's so many, and we've also got pollution from the cars, those car drivers who decide to fit those exhausts to their car, which sounds like gunfire.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, we've got those motorbike gangs that drive around 20 up, who sit like children at the traffic lights, revving their engines aggressively. Right. So when combined with the minor complaint of music from venues, the music from venues, that's a petty complaint. The bigger issue is all of the above, which is all unenforced. And of course, when in central London, sometimes there's lots of roadworks that you see happening, and the authorities, they have to fit those temporary traffic lights. Again, drivers are so impatient, thinking that the traffic lights are broken, and they'll jump on their horn. So that's the issue with central London. I'm in Farringdon, which is only like 10 minutes away from Soho. But I'm often in Soho myself. So that's the issue here. Yes, there is a little bit of noise pollution from clubs, but I think the licensing authorities, they're strict with making it mandatory that there's lots of sound evidence. So not a lot of sound creeps out from that. So that's the main issue, really. Not necessarily the clubs itself. It's all the environmental noise.
Do you not think, though, that some councils, and I'm not pointing to Westminster City Council in particular, but there are some councils in the country who complain that they don't have enough money, and yet they go out of their way to stifle new businesses from either being set up or introduce new regulations which existing businesses then have to follow, which cost them money, which then lead to them going out of business, which means that the council gets less money. They don't. It's a bit like national government. They don't seem to understand how their local economies work.
That may very well be the case, that there are some councils who will stifle some business. And you're right, they are shooting themselves in the foot, because obviously if they permit certain businesses to be licensed or to be established, then that may bring some economy, some money into their area. But in terms of the London councils, we're talking Westminster and we're talking Camden, Islington. Those councils have plenty of money, and in fact, many of the venues that I'm seeing in central London, they are closing down. There was the Salsa Club, the Salsa Bar on Charing Cross Road, if anyone knows it, that's now no longer there. And there's quite a few other venues that are no longer there. So and I'm just going back to my main point. That's why the issue isn't necessarily venues, which are closing in Soho and the surrounding areas. It's the issues surrounding the venues that cause the residents to use whatever they can as a means of complaining. So that's what I think is happening.
OK, Jason, thank you very much. I mean, listen, to an extent, nighttime economies have always fluctuated. And I think since I've been presenting on LBC, where, well, of course, now I'm not at Leicester Square, I'm at Millbank for four days a week. But the number of restaurants that have closed in and around Leicester Square over the last 15 years, I mean, has to be seen to be believed. Some of them only last a few months before they close, and somebody new comes in and thinks that they can make a better job of it. But that isn't necessarily anything related to the general nighttime economy. It's because the rents in areas like Leicester Square are stratospheric. So the overheads for any new business, I mean, are mind-blowing. So restaurants, I mean, apparently 80% of restaurants close within the first year of operation, which is a staggering statistic. When you have a cost of living crisis, and when you have a population that seems to have got out of the habit of going out so much of an evening, it obviously puts a lot of people off. Maybe people who've got a really innovative restaurant idea, they may think twice about it nowadays. Michael says, I inspect and value properties for mortgages. Some lenders would decline a property for a mortgage purpose if it is above or adjacent to a commercial property, if the commercial use adversely affects saleability, or we have to reflect the commercial use on the valuation. I mean, that's effectively saying that some people just wouldn't be able to get a mortgage if they wanted to buy a flat or a house next to a nightclub, which is, again, in itself is madness. Terry is in Bournemouth. Terry, hello.
Hello, Ian. Nighttime economies, there's so many things that it requires to work. And what I'm really focusing on is entertainers for obvious reasons. But does anyone realise how difficult it is these days now to come into a large city, find somewhere to park that you can actually unload your sound equipment? Because there's so many one-way systems, there's so many yellow lines, there's so many red routes. There's people I know in the business that are just saying, and I'm one of them included, I'm just not going to do central London. I'm not going to do, I went up to Birmingham a little while ago, 30 quid to park in a car park so I could go and see Meatloaf's band. What's left of Meatloaf's band? Fantastic. But 30 quid to park in a car park in central Birmingham. Imagine if somebody was doing a gig, you've got the guitarist, it really puts people off. And imagine the difficulties for people delivering food, delivering stuff. It's the servicing of the business as well as the lack of footfall. People used to be able to drive. I grew up in London. I grew up in North London. We often used to just pop into the West End, park in a side street somewhere after 6 o'clock and go around, maybe buy a meal, go to a nightclub. You just can't do it anymore. And it's stopping people coming in from outside, I believe. That's entertainers and footfall.
Well, you are right about the costs. I mean, particularly parking. I mean, 30 quid is cheap for London. If you want to park,
that was Birmingham.
Yeah, I know. But if you want to park in Leicester Square car park, it's over £60. But then people will say, well, you should be coming in by train. But then again, if you live outside London and the trains finish at midnight or before, you can't. There's no alternative, is there?
Or indeed, if you look at a lot of the bands that really made it big, like your Queens and people like that, even the Stones, they were travelling in decades ago in a little old van parking up somewhere. People used to come into London to entertain people. The knock-on effect was clubs would book them, restaurants maybe would book a duo or a single singer. It's so expensive to do it now that the locale of the West End is almost relying on people that live in the West End for footfall. Nothing's coming in from outside, and people are just not going to spend the money anymore to service it. Like I say, if you've got to carry some speakers and you've got to carry drums and guitar, 2 or 3 cars, £60 in Leicester Square, what's that going to cost you? 3 cars? Before you've even plugged an instrument in,
Now, for the uninitiated, you are a Meatloaf impersonator, so you're appearing all over the country. I mean, are you on tour at the moment?
Yeah, tour's still running. We've got a few more theatre dates. We're in Malvern Theatres, Jackie Smith Land.
Well, that's where Jackie and I came to see you. You're going back there.
Exactly.
They can't get enough Meatloaf in Malvern.
They asked us to come back, yes. No, it's looking good for next year as well. Thank you for mentioning it. Yeah, looking very good for next year. So, but then again, this is different. These are theatres, mostly provincial. They usually have a car park, a loading bay. The logistics of that is a lot easier than trying to do a venue in a big city. It really, how people can make a living now, I really don't know. I feel sorry for the proprietors, really.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Must have been why you hurt. I won't say that.
Oh dear, Chris has nearly had a heart attack listening to that. Terry, thank you very much indeed. Always good to talk to you. If you before you go, Terry, tell us where you are going to be appearing over the next few months and where people can get tickets.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's the Malvern Theatres. That's on the 25th of June. And then we're in the Garrick Theatre in Lichfield on the 3rd of July. The theatre tour starts again next January. We are going to be almost on home turf in Christchurch in Dorset, because I live in Bournemouth. And that's on the 24th of January. If anyone wants to find out, very, very simply, just have a look at backintohellshow.com. That's the website.
Well, and Terry comes with my complete endorsement. I've seen him and his band twice live, and it is the most amazing evening. You will have a great time. Terry, thank you very much indeed. Right, more calls in a moment. We're asking, do you agree with Sir Sadiq Khan in saying that local councillors are hurting business and society, or is he going against democracy here? And where is the best nighttime city in the UK? It's 9:46.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Henry Riley.
At 11, should NHS staff be allowed to wear political badges such as pro-Palestinian symbols on their uniform? But first, is Keir Starmer right that Elon Musk is trying to whip up division in Britain?
Henry Riley at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Some dodgy bits, but that goes for anywhere. I know you were made to feel unwelcome last time you were there due to come here, Iain. I had tickets, but don't let a few small-minded people put you off. I'll buy you a pint next time you're here. Well, I imagine I'll be there in September, October at the Labour Party conference, because they always seem to hold their conferences in Liverpool nowadays. And I must admit, I got to enjoy Liverpool, even if I was banned from appearing at the Royal Philharmonic Hall, because I had the temerity 10 years ago to publish a book on Hillsborough, which some people disapproved of. There you go. Right, let's go to Sean in Brighton. Hello, Sean.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, what would you like to say?
Well, just you're talking about how places have changed, and Brighton's gone the opposite way. Brighton used to be awesome. It used to be, dare I say, spit and sawdust, where somebody once described Brighton to me, and I think that it's better than I could ever have said it. It's where everybody used to be able to afford a little bit of everything. And you went out, you used to be able to get a decent two-course meal for 20 quid. And we're talking probably 10 years ago. We're not talking a long time ago. And then, unfortunately, all the snobs from London came down, and immediately there was an avalanche of people moving in. They bought up all the property, all the previously reasonably priced property, sent the property through the roof, immediately started kicking people out who were renting, and that's, you're seeing the crystallisation of that now with the Renters' Rights Act. That, one property wasn't enough for them. They bought 2, 3, 4, 5, doubled the rents. The rents then were extortionate, were unaffordable to the locals, so that meant more London people coming down. The cost of living went up and up and up and up. The locals got priced out of their own area. And we went from being a place where it was almost a license to print money. I used to drive a cab in Brighton, and it was a real 24-hour atmosphere and a real 24-hour economy. But these people that moved in, they had absolutely no respect for what they were moving into. It was immediately, we want to make it into what we want it. They moved in, and the all-night bars or the late-night bars that were in the shadow of their flats. No, got to close that down. We've got to get up early in the morning to get a train from London. We don't want a bar open at 2, 3 in the morning. So consequently, Brighton used to be an economy of shift workers. So what's important about shift workers is you've always got one group of people, or more than one group of people, or at least one group of people that are off, be it a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, a Friday, a Saturday, even a Sunday. So you've always got a vibrant economy. They priced and pushed out the shift workers. I mean, you've been to Brighton, no doubt, Ian. There was a big, very, very old gay bar in Brighton called the Bulldog. That changed hands. The guy that used to run that, I can't say on the radio because it's rude what he said to Brighton Council when he'd left. He'd run a bar in Brighton for donkey's years, and a very good one at that. The Bulldog used to gross God knows how many grand a week. And he's now bought a whopping great big bar in Tenerife and told the council basically to ram it. There was another one, a very famous case called the Blind Tiger. A load of people from London moved into the lofts, obviously, which used to be the attics of a warehouse that were converted into bijou palaces. And immediately they started whining about the Blind Tiger music venue. Been open for donkey's years. That got closed down. That's what they've done to Brighton now. So Brighton, consequently, nobody can afford anything. So you've got less and less people going out, and that's why your businesses are closing. There's a big one on the coast called Legends. Legends, latest in the press a little while ago, due to the extortionate rates, they're having to close down. They've been open donkey's years.
I think rates is one of the biggest barriers to businesses nowadays because people, I mean, certainly in the last year, a lot of hospitality businesses have seen their rates bills shoot up by tens of thousands of pounds. And that's the last straw for many businesses.
Oh, indeed. But also it's the changing, it's the changing of the area. I mean, I went round one day to get a breakfast, and you used to be able to get a really good fry up in Brighton for about £7-8. I went round to the cafe that used to do it well. The cafe's shut down. It's now a little bistro, and on the front door, Jerusalem artichoke soup and artisan bread, $9.99. $9.99, a tenner for a bowl of soup.
You sound like my dad. I can get that cheaper at home, he'd say. Sean, thank you very much indeed. Mark says, if you want a good night out, Cardiff is the place to go. Live Lounge is open 7 days a week till 4 a.m. Alan says, I wrote an article for Gay London Life, the magazine that stressed how Shoreditch is the new place to go. Soho is dead. I don't think it's not dead. It's not what it used to be, I think is the way to put it. Pip's in Basingstoke. Hello, Pip.
Hiya.
Hi, what would you like to say?
I just texted originally, but I've got a phone and just say, basically, I used to love my clubbing and stuff when I was in the 90s, early 2000s, and every time I go back to those places where I used to go, they're all shut. Everything's dead. So South Sea along Portsmouth, along the seafront, that used to be really lively. That's all gone now. A lot of it's been sort of gentrified flats. A little nightclub down in Petersfield, that's gone now as well. Again, lots of people making flats nearby, and then people complain about the noise. And I don't understand why you move into the centre of town and moan about noise. You must know what you're doing. It's the same problem if people move next to a church and moan about the church bells.
Quite.
Why would you do that? Swanage is the same. So they've had lots of places shut down there over the years, like little nightclubs and things. Again, people move in, go, oh, it's too noisy. Why are they moving there if they don't like the noise? It's so ridiculous. And like your last caller said, nightlife is kind of dwindling everywhere now. And a lot of it is because of, noise complaints and kind of, how do I put this? A lot of people moving from, certain places like London and wanting to make a kind of countrified, nice little town. And they, I don't know, they grow out of their clubbing and then they want to kind of make it all genteel for themselves when they're older. But that kind of leaves it boring for the rest of the people who don't want to do that.
And what's the nightlife like in Basingstoke?
Well, Basingstoke has its own issues in terms of, so they've had lots of clubs that are kind of open and closed. To be fair, I'm a bit past that now as well. But, but there's lots of pubs that close down constantly and the rates, again, are all really expensive. And the taxes and everything, and pubs are dying in death, again, because of all the taxes and everything else. So it's the complaints, the noise complaints and all the taxes, really, that's doing the nightlife in.
Pip, thank you very much. JH says, nightlife or live bands, I hear Southend is an interesting place. So is Norwich and Brighton. Nightlife in Norwich in the 1980s. Don't get me started on that. Pizza 1, pancakes 2. Ritzy's, Rick's Place. I could go on. All places I frequented. Tim is not happy with me. He says, you always have an excellent and intelligent and interesting show, but you've let yourself down a bit this evening, Iain, where you weren't very polite about my comment. It was not a nice look. Well, your comment was pretty misogynistic, Tim, so that's all I was pointing out, but I'm sorry if I offended you. Do keep listening. Thanks for all of your calls and messages this evening and throughout this week. I'll be back on Monday evening from 7. If you missed any of this evening's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinion. There'll be a new episode of Where Politics Meets History on your phones early tomorrow morning. It's an absolute corker. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur, but right now, in for Ben Kentish, here's Henry Wright.